Okay, now we will convene the Mesa City Council study session for June 12th, 2025. Mr. Smith, I want to confirm, did we cover everything on the CFDs?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Again, council members Goforth and Ms. Duff are absent and are excused, and all members of the council are present. Item 1 is to review the agenda we have for Monday, June 16th. Let's go through the agenda. And council members, do you have any questions on our upcoming council meeting? Vice Mayor.
I'll start. 4A, Ray Road improvements. This is the realignment of Ray Road. We've been looking forward to this for a long time. This will help clear up some traffic. Just a few questions. There's not a lot of detail in the documents here, so it does mention that there's going to be some signaled intersections. Does that include Hawes Road, or is that going to be separate? Because I know we're working on that. See, the problem is when it gets too crowded in here, you got to shimmy through.
Lance is making his way.
Well, I think this is one of Lance's first time up here
Hi,
as
Lance.
new city manager or city engineer.
Yeah, we're all
We have a new city manager.
Butler, Brady, we're all doing it.
Yeah, so Mayor.
Hi, Lance.
Mayor and council member, we intend to start the Ray Road project in mid-August. That'll be about 12 months of actual construction, 13 months for that. There is another project that we have for Ellsworth Road from 202 south to Germain also. That we'll be bringing that forward to the council on July 8th.
Okay. But Hawes Road, so Ray Road at Hawes, this would be west of the 202-24 junction. So that's not a signalized intersection yet. We've been discussing a signal there. I just wanted to know, is that part of this project? Is it separately funded?
Yeah, that will be part of this project.
Okay, so we'll have that done as well. All right.
Yes.
And then I see a 15-month time frame. Do we know when we're going to start with that?
For this project?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll start in about mid-August.
Oh, it's going to be nice and warm. And then the last thing, I just want to put a buzz in everybody's ear. So currently, Ellsworth Road, if you think of it, there's a Ray Road South and a Ray Road North. We're going to tie those together. That northern section of Ray Road will still remain. Are we thinking about a renaming of that street to Serenity because it lines up with Serenity and Eastmark? And it would be a good idea to at least look into whether we could do that. I know that's a pain in the butt to rename a street, but if we leave it Ray Road, there's going to be 2 Ray Roads. And I'm sure we haven't looked at it, so why don't we have
Mayor,
a discussion
Vice Mayor,
about
yeah,
that?
we'll have transportation take a look at that.
They're going to love it. They're going to love it.
No problem.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Mr. Reddy.
I think on the 4I and 4J on the pavement preservation or pavement services, is there like a calendar on improvements on the on pavement from the transportation department or? I know these are contracts for vendors to do the work, but is there, I'm just asking for if there's a calendar of areas that the pavement improvements will be happening over the next 6 months or something?
Good morning, council, mayor and council. We do have a forecast for the entire year that we can share.
Sure.
The work is not scheduled. We schedule that a few months prior, before we get there, but we do have a forecast that we can share with you.
Okay. I'm just curious if that can be shared, just, people call in and email us like, what's happening with our, street, and just so you have a heads up, and maybe that calendar can be shared, even the forecast, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll share the calendar. It'll break it down by the type of treatments that we plan on doing as well. So
Perfect.
We'll get that to you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to bounce off that. So on those treatments, this is a little bit to the side, but it's related. we're having the fiber cable installed in the street through microtrenching. And there's been some concern about the patching that happens. And what I've been telling people is that over time, that's all going to blend in. So as you do the maintenance on these roads, you got several different types that you do. At what point will we see that kind of start to blend into the street again?
So that's a good question. It depends on the type of material that's being used. And so it does take a little bit of time because you're going to see the variance of the old asphalt and the crack seal. But usually it takes about a year or two before it starts blending in completely with the street.
Oh, okay. So it just takes a little bit of time.
It takes a little bit.
And I've kind of equated that to what's similar is to the crack seal. Because as you go through, you can see that for a while and then it just starts to blend in over time. But it's good to know that that's going to blend in. And as we do this kind of work, it should look even better.
Vice Mayor, yes, it should. The thing is with the fiber, it's usually on the edge of the asphalt, and so the more wear you have on that, kind of helps it blend in. There's just not a lot of wear there.
So that's why it takes a year.
So it'll take a little
Okay.
longer. Yes.
That's just some good information. Thanks.
Thank you, Orlando. Anything else, Council?
Mine
Ms. Pillsbury.
should be easy. I'm just curious on 4K. I haven't heard of this save before. Can I just get a little bit of background? Did you get background on it?
going to ask that too.
Oh,
Yeah.
Is this something we do every year? Is this something we've been doing for a long time? Does different organizations take a turn being the lead agency? I wasn't familiar with this.
Good morning. My name is Christy Garcia, Procurement Administrator. Good morning, Mayor Freeman, Councilmember Spilsbury. Yes, SAVE is a cooperative organization of local Arizona entities, governmental agencies, school districts. It's our own cooperative, and each agency will be a lead occasionally in those contracts that everybody uses. So for example, office supplies, we did it as the lead agency for SAVE, which allows all the other members of SAVE to utilize that contract.
And this is something we've done for years?
Yep, we've been members of SAVE. SAVE has been around for 30 years plus, something like that, a long time.
Okay, I don't know why I
Yeah.
haven't heard of it before. So it's just an organization so that a lot of people are
Well-
buying stuff, so the price goes down to
Well,
basically?
it's a membership just of all the local entities. So yeah, we pull all of our needs and our spend together. So for example, the office supply contract, we identified overall spend of over $8 million. So when the vendors go and bid, they recognize that it's a contract that many agencies will be utilizing and the spend will be large.
The
So-
8 million is the 100 agencies as part of it?
Correct.
Okay, all right. That's kind of what I expected, but I just haven't heard of it, so, okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
and different agencies will take turn being leads for different contracts but any contract that a SAVE entity does allows any SAVE partner to utilize that contract as if they had done it.
Yeah, I saw this on there too, and Mr. Butler, I think this is an example of trying to celebrate our successes that maybe we haven't done in the past. Because as you read this material, they went to a reserve auction, which reduced the bid 51%. We've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars on this bid alone. And these are the kinds of stories that we need to get out and tell. This is how we are smart with taxpayer dollars, and it's not just SAVE, but we have a number of co-ops and purchase agreements that help reduce costs, and we should tell that story and celebrate it a little bit more than we do. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, Mayor, Vice Mayor, I think you're right. And as Christy was saying, it's not just the commodity cost. If you think about the fact of how we're able to share that administrative burden with other cooperative cities, that way, just as a larger city, we're not bearing the brunt of the administrative side of trying to administer all of this. So I think that is an important component too, besides the commodity savings along with that.
Mr. Adams, did you have a question on this? No, I have another item. Okay. So it's like being a member of Costco and Sam's Club, sort of,
Sort of, yeah. It just pulls all of our spend together in hopes that, we'll get better pricing because they're looking at the overall spend just versus our agency spend.
Yeah, it's member savings.
Correct.
All right, great. Thank you, Christy.
All right.
Any other questions?
I have a few. Just for staff points, so items 5A through 5F, or modifying, adding new fees, or changing some things, got a little bit of input on that, some concern. Most of this doesn't seem to be impacting the vast majority of our residents. Can we just get a very brief summary of what some of these changes are? Maybe if I gave you a heads up on the question.
No, that's fine. Sam's ready. Yeah.
Like, for example, Falcon Field as an example are tie-down fees, rental fees. I don't have a plane. Most Mesa residents don't have a plane, so that's really not going to impact you.
Correct. Good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is Samuel Schultz. I'm the Assistant Director for the Office of Management and Budget. So on the agenda is new fee, modifying fees and charges, and majority of these fees and charges aren't hitting residents directly. The first one is the arts and culture. Arts and culture is doing a couple fees with their rentals. Those fees are intended for ticket shows as well as an increase to their handling fee. That is going to be for individuals that visit the MAC and for those purchasing tickets. So if you're purchasing a ticket, that's the impact of that fee. The next one is going to be for development services. That's good. The fee impact for that one, for their new adaptive reuse permit fee, that's going to be a hit to developers, and that's a cost recovery fee to then ensure that we're covering the cost of the work that's being done on those.
Okay.
Economic development, that's going to be for parking, and that's going to be for residents and multifamily and or businesses of the downtown area. So it's to pay for the parking of that increase there.
And we had a long discussion about that, and DMA had meetings with the community and had a discussion. I think it had been some 15 years.
So it was
Since the last
2020, we did it in 22 or 23, but before that, it was 15 years.
Okay, so that was close.
Yep.
All right. So it just to the point, a lot of these administrative changes or fees that are related to development or specific areas, and not, folks shouldn't worry too much. It's unless you're going to use, like I go to the MAC, I'll probably pay a little bit higher fee for something, but then that's my choice.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I wanted for that.
Great.
And I did have a question, Mayor, on the next item, 5G. So the 5G is related to, a little bit related to the, well, it is related to the Community Facilities District and the agreements that we have in place with Brookfield. It's listed in here, by the way, as DMB. It's actually Brookfield. I don't know if we need to make a change. But one of those agreements is related to the maintenance for, and when we look at this item, what it's saying is that the CFD will be, correct me if I'm wrong, the CFD or the Alliance will be responsible for maintenance of the park wall adjacent to Phase 3 and Phase 4 of the Great Park. So in looking at this, these are residential walls that are adjacent to a portion of the Great Park, and the maintenance is going to be either for the Alliance or the homeowner. My question is this pretty typical? Are we treating these folks the same way as we do in other parks that have residential walls that are adjacent to parks? For example, Augusta Ranch and Highland Ridge, just in my district, have very similar view walls, and they're adjacent to the park. Are we treating them, Eastmark folks, the same way we're going to treat the other folks? That
Mayor?
looked like a yes.
Mayor, Councilmember Summers, yes, the
Okay.
parks are not fenced, so the codes don't require fences around park parcels.
Okay.
And in this particular case, that wall was built almost at the same time as that phase of the park. And so that's why we needed clarification that the responsibility for maintenance of those walls falls on the community association or the homeowners, because we don't fence parks. Those walls are there for the homes.
Okay. I mean, I'm responsible for the walls around my house too. And all I wanted to make sure is that the folks who are around the Great Park in Eastmark aren't being treated any differently than any other park that is a similar situation. And it sounds like that is the case.
Vice Mayor, that is the case across the board.
Across the board.
When we have any questions or maintenance concerns that come up with walls around basins or parks, it does go to the homeowner.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. That was my only question. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to discuss 5I for just a few moments. I've had a chance to review the new contract that's been approved by the Visit Mesa Board and had a great presentation from Mr. Kennington on this. I think the only question that I have, primary question I have is, we're going from a 1-year to a 3-year agreement. I have a substantial history with Visit Mesa, was a board member for 16 years or so, chaired it for a couple. Mr. Brady had seen fit a couple years ago to move to a 1-year agreement. There were some issues that needed to be addressed. An outside consultant on governance was brought in. And to my knowledge and from Mr. Kennington's presentation, a good number of reforms have been put in place. So overall, I think that the issues that needed to be addressed have been tightened up from a governance standpoint, a financial accountability standpoint, and so forth. I'm uncomfortable moving into a 3-year agreement from a 1-year agreement because I think when you have issues that need to be addressed, and then Mr. Brady came in and tightened things up and made certain requirements, I think going from a 1 to a 3 might be a little bit of a stretch that I wouldn't be comfortable with. So my only issue here is the term of this proposed agreement. Maybe a shorter term as we step back into a higher level of trust and relationship might be something we'd want to consider. Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, so Mayor, Councilmember Adams, thank you for that. Mr. Kennington's out today. He'll be back on Monday, and we can get into any specific questions you all may have since he was our lead on negotiating this. But just overall, the sentiment was that we really saw some great progress in the relationship between the city and Visit Mesa over this past year. They met all of the requests that we had of them and have worked really cooperatively with city and city staff since that time. Prior to this 1-year agreement, we used to have 5-year agreements with Visit Mesa. So in light of the fact that we are seeing very positive movement, a good relationship that's happening between the two organizations, we thought that moving to a 3-year agreement was a good compromise that showed that progress is being made. There's also the ability, and I know the city attorney can speak to that, there's an out clause on this in the event that we feel that relationship has taken a different turn than we expect it to. There are protections built in for the city to do that. So in light of just giving Visit Mesa a little bit more predictability and stability moving forward, council member, that's where we thought that 3 years was a reasonable place to go to.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I was just reviewing the document. I share the same concerns about the 3-year deal, given the recent history. Since Mr. Kennington isn't here today, I won't really expect an answer, but if we could have this conversation before council when he comes. I would like to see a little bit, or hear a little bit more from him, and maybe even Visit Mesa if they want to show up.
We do have representatives today from Visit Mesa, if you would like to hear from anyone.
A couple things that were of concern over the past couple of years. One was audit and record review. When there was questions about some of the spending and how that worked, and we requested an audit, basically all we got was a piece of paper that said, yeah, they're running it the way they are. That wasn't deep enough to really delve into the problem. So I'm interested to know what this paragraph says about the audit and how that's changed. It looks like we have a conflict of interest statement requirement now, if we didn't before. So to hear about that, to make sure that they're a board member, what the board policy is. Actually, that is a good question for Visit Mesa. What are their board policies going to be for that? And then I know there's a termination piece in here. I can't find it. I read it earlier. But it sounds like the same language that we have had previously that allows that. The 3-year deal, I was a little concerned about. Mike, just to put out there what my idea is, I kind of like the idea of maybe a 2-year deal, stepping into a little bit more trust. The reason I come up with a 2-year deal, we have 1 more year on the current board chair's tenure. I know that individual. I like the work that he's doing over there to try to mend that relationship. And then that chair will step off and we'll have a new chair that serves, I believe, a 2-year term. And so to reevaluate this midterm on that new board chair and allow us to say, yeah, this is going well, and then maybe then a 3-year or longer deal might be a compromise position for this council. That's it. Thank you.
Ms. Spilsbury.
Yeah, I just was able to also have the presentation by Kennington and met with Visit Mesa, and I feel very comfortable with the 3-year. I think the 3-year is the compromise. That's what you said. We were used to always do 5 years, so I think 3 years is already less than what we have done in the past, but that they've showed a lot of good faith movement. They've had outside organizations come in to evaluate things. This wasn't just internal that they've been doing. So I feel really comfortable. I think for their organization and trying to plan for the future, I think 3-year makes a lot more sense to help them out. So I'm totally fine with the 3-year.
Mayor, I do know Mr. Garcia and some of his board members are here. If you'd like to hear from anyone from Visit Mesa on some of the questions.
Mr. Garcia, would you like to speak? Mr. Kavanaugh, thank you.
Mayor and Council, I'm Dennis Kavanaugh. I'm the board chair of Visit Mesa, and I've been on the board since 2017. Prior to that, I was a city council liaison to Visit Mesa. And I wanted to address some of the concerns, particularly about the 3-year, 5-year, 2-year situation. And it should be known that all of our competitors in Arizona, DMOs, have 5-year agreements. We have 5-year agreements, and there was a purpose behind that former board chair Rich Adams will remember, is that people we do business with to book tournaments, conferences, conventions, and meetings, they book them years out. And they want stability and certainty that the people they make the deal with are still there when time comes for them. And so in the past, there's never been an issue with that. Under 5-year agreements or 1-year agreements, we've delivered 100% of the KPIs or the commitments that we were able to do, and that was in part because of good leadership of people like Mr. Adams chairing the board. The issue of governance and finances, we have done extensive work over the last 1.5 years on all the issues, both requested by city staff and by consultants, both that we have had at Visit Mesa as well as the city council consultants, appointed consultants. Conflict of interest, we had a very positive working relationship with city staff, and we've developed a common conflict of interest form that both city-appointed board members and non-city board members can sign. So that was, thank you, Mr. Smith, for doing that. And so as July 1, we'll all be signing the same agreement. We had 2 separate ones for a while, but we've followed all the directions and advice of the city attorney to revise our conflict of interest statements. We substantially strengthened our governance for all the things that we do. Our audits have been clean. We have strict separation of accounts of private monies and public monies, and any board member or any council member can ask. For example, if you want to see a printout of all transactions to and from our private accounts, we can push a button to do that. but we're not going to create two separate books. Our CPA auditors would go nuts if we do that. And keeping separate books is not a good idea for any public or private organization. But I will say that we have developed a great working relationship. Mr. Kennington has been superb in listening to us, asking the right questions, and our board has been very responsive to that. So that's what, at least prefacing my comments, just to set the stage that it's been a very good first year for me, and I have confidence in the succession planning that that Visit Mesa has long used. I joined the executive committee and was board treasurer for Mr. Adams when he was board chair. Moved up and I was board secretary when Mr. Hutchinson was board chair for 2 years, and then vice president when Mr. Grupp was chair. And so we've tried to develop a way to have a strong board that's representative of the community and of the public. And again, we have continued 100% to deliver on everything the city has asked for us, at least over the last dozen years.
Good morning, Mayor, council members. Chairman Kavanaugh just laid it out perfect. I don't know how much more I can add than what he's just offered. I would say that I'm extremely proud of our award-winning team, our award-winning programs. We've won just about every award in this DMO business that you can win. And I think based upon some questions that were raised before we walked up here, I think there was an assertion that we may not have had some of these policies. A lot of these policies already existed. We had conflict of interest policies. We do an annual financial audit. We use a good firm here in Mesa, Lohman & Company, we have for the last several years. And lots of different governance policies. Now, was it time for us to have another audit to take a look at those things? Absolutely. We hadn't done one since 2019. So it was good. We're always looking to improve. We're always looking to be better. And I just might remind folks here that when this was the Mesa Convention and Visitors Bureau prior to my arrival, there were no accounting policies of any kind, no board policies of any kind, no strategic plans, no 10-year master plans, and we've done all that under our tenure. So again, proud of our organization. We continue to sell, market, tell the great story that the city of Mesa has to offer, and we welcome guests from all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions?
Thank you. Mark and Dennis, can you elaborate? I know part of the work, a lot of what you do at Visit Mesa is kind of reaching out externally outside of Arizona or outside of the city, but the more recent work, kind of doing more internal work, partnerships with downtown and other areas in Mesa to highlight what we have here. Just elaborate a little bit on that work that you've done more recently, right? Because I think a lot of that was in discussion when we went to a 1 year, like how do we do more work here in Mesa while we also want visitors to come in, right? So from outside of Mesa, so.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Heredia, I'll go first.
Sure.
As part of the master plan, 10-year master plan project, our process that we approved previously in our 3-year strategic plan, one of the goals that we heard from you and from the community was to increase our efforts to showcase what we do locally. And so that's been a big part of our social media efforts. If you follow us on social media, you'll see that we have dramatically increased highlighting what's happening locally, actually every week in Mesa. And we've had good partners throughout the city. But that's been a goal to, again, encourage people who live in Mesa to take advantage of the amenities and facilities here. At the same time, we're striving to get tournaments, conferences, conventions, and meetings from the rest of the country, in fact, all around the world, to come to Mesa. And that's been, they're kind of twin paths. Make sure you're known in your own town and showcase the partnerships that we have. And in fact, we've grown the local partnerships dramatically, really, over the last 18 months.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Heredia, great question, and that is an important distinction that you brought up at the outset about traditionally us, marketing, storytelling outside of Mesa, because that is, after all, our core competency. That's why we exist. That's why the Mesa Convention and Visitors Bureau and Visit Mesa were formed to begin with. Our job is to drive incremental tax revenue growth for the city via hotel stays and other visitor spending outside of the hotels. So that's why we exist. So it's always going to be our Magna Carta, if you will. But there has been a movement, and not just locally, but nationally among DMOs, to put the resident first. So everything that we do, and you'll see it weaved in through our master plan, our strategic plan, our annual business development plan, is what we are doing good for the Mesa resident? What is the value proposition for the Mesa resident? And so it's woven into just about everything we do. He mentioned our social media efforts. Those have been elevated dramatically. And we try to explain thoroughly, especially this time of year. We start to get into May, June, July, some of our down period. That's when we sort of pivot to talk to our residents about the value proposition that is the visitor economy, and how bringing in more visitor dollars helps keep resident taxes lower, and just telling that story. You know, and after all, who wants to be called a tourist anyway, right? So you try to position your brand from a resident's point of view, because after all, visitors now, they don't want to go to the tourist places, right? They want to go where the residents go.
I've been working my wife over for a vacation for some time.
You want to be a visitor, not a tourist.
All right.
Mr. Adams.
Thank you, gentlemen. Dennis, Mr. Kavanaugh, I think you and I have known each other for over 30 years, and I consider you, and always have, to be an honest and ethical man, and I think this is a situation where the right person was in the right place at the right time. I'm very comfortable with the fact that you, as board chair at Visit Mesa, have shepherded through some of these audits, worked with the consultants, worked with your board, worked with Mr. Garcia to improve things, and I want to publicly thank you for that, because I'm confident that the job is done correctly with you at the helm. So just want to make that comment and thank you for the work you've done.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other comments? I'll just finally say that, you know, we have a great working relationship with Visit Mesa, and I felt like, you know, when I became mayor, that this comes to the mayor's office, you know, we have the conversations, what is the best way to move forward? And I think as we've had the discussion, you know, we put some guardrails, you got good governance. We have an audit. You know, number 11 says, you know, termination notice. You know, if we have a disagreement within 60 days, we can terminate our agreement with you. And, you know, that's written in there. So to your concern, you know, Mr. Adams, that there's a guardrail in there. And so I think there's a lot of good things in place. And I really felt like the 3-year agreement was a best stepping stone. And then we'll look at the 5-year in the future. So, you know, 3 years goes pretty quick. And I know we're having a conversation, well, 1 or 2 or 3 years, but at the end of the day, I felt like, you know, we trust you to run your organization effectively. We have council representation on there that comes back and gives us feedback. And so consequently, I just felt like a 3-year agreement was appropriate at this time. So with that, if there's nothing else, then thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All right. Council, any more on this item? Great. I had a question. This was kind of unusual, 5H with an IGA with the city of Scottsdale on ambulance service. I know Chief Kameli, I saw her out there, but I've never had an IGA with another municipality like that, Mr. Butler.
Okay, great. I think the chief's coming in because she can do a much better job than I can of explaining,
you know, provide
to council, but
backup ambulance
it
service.
is, and I know that's the intent. I'll maybe stall for a minute as the chief comes in, but that is exactly the intent. We have this agreement. Chief can clarify. I don't think it's the only agency that we plan to or have entered into this agreement with, where we do have backup ambulance service. And here she is, right in time, just to make sure I don't misstate anything.
You stalled very well. Thank you,
You
Chief.
made the 4-minute response time. Good job.
There you go. Better.
See? And you saved him.
I apologize. What was the question at hand here?
An overview of the backup ambulance service with
Scottsdale, IGA.
yes,
I mean,
yes.
that, I know we have neighboring communities that we provide backup, you know, but then Scottsdale's a little out of over here.
Okay, great. Mayor
Maybe just an
Freeman,
overview.
members of the council, for sure. We are doing this, we've done this with every city. When they have ambulances, Scottsdale's going to get their own CON and do ambulances as well. And as emergency response, we want to get these IGAs in place early on, so when we need ambulances, there's no hesitation, they can cross borders. Every city has what's called a certificate of necessity, and we can do our response through in our city only. And so it's important that we have these IGAs so we can cross borders. We have state requirements that you can't go outside the CON unless you have IGAs in place. And sometimes, like, we even go into Phoenix. If they have something big enough, we would end up in Phoenix and, even in central Phoenix, sometimes west side, depending on what it is. And so same thing with Scottsdale. When they need assistance or ambulances, if need be, they can cross borders and respond.
Okay. And we have that with the other neighboring, like Chandler, Gilbert,
All
Queen
of them.
Creek,
Yes.
Superstition.
Yes, since we got our own ambulances, we did get our IGAs with all of our neighboring and everybody in the valley here that we would respond with.
So it's kind of like automatic aid between everybody.
Absolutely. That's kind of how we're looking at that. So our ambulances cross borders just as our fire trucks do.
Okay. Vice Mayor.
So I've talked to your assistant chief about this because I have a few concerns. So from what I understand, the C of Ns under DHS require that we do these types of agreements, so I understand that. Some of the things that I've asked to have a look at in the chief's office is what tends to happen on these kind of agreements is as things get busy, if there's an emergency, they draw resources more centrally, and that puts a burden on the outlying areas. So there's, you're standing in the middle of Phoenix or downtown here, there's a lot of ambulances around us. But in Southeast Mesa, we got a couple, and if they get drawn centrally, then my response times go up. And that's the same with Queen Creek, and because we're kind of on the edge. So I'm a little concerned about that, and I'm waiting to see some SOPs or some kind of policy that states at what point will we provide the ambulances and when we will not provide ambulance support. Because we need to cover ourselves, but we also want to make sure that we're good partners because we might have a disaster too at an airport. Let's hope not.
Sure.
So we'll want to utilize this. We just want to make sure that it's fair and balanced, and ambulances are particularly special because they go to the hospital, they get tied up there, and it takes them a while to turn around. So I don't want to see our resources depleted because of the agreement with Scottsdale, which, by the way, in this, it says that we border them, and we do not.
I mean, we're saying border in
Ish.
terms of, because of automatic
Border-ish.
aid, we have no boundaries really. So, but, and Mayor, Vice Mayor, to answer that question, we do have the move-up policy. So when we pull ambulances from the east side, we'll take them from the west and move them east. So we will keep that in mind. And I did speak to Chief Hayes. We will be getting the data that you had requested, so you can see the numbers on that as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad you talked to her. She can tell you all the rest of the stuff I said.
And Mayor, Vice Mayor, I know the chief knows we're very sensitive and have been for a long time, just making sure that there is a balance on basically essentially automatic aid. We just want to make sure that everyone's using the system the way it's intended, and that and ambulances go the same as we think of fire apparatus. We just want to make sure that we're there for backup and assistance. That, like you said, God forbid, we need backup and assistance from others, and we do.
Yeah,
we do. And it happens consistently, and we appreciate that arrangement, but we want to make sure it's fair and equitable, and everyone is pitching in equitably
That's a
to
good way
that
to process.
process.
Thank you.
Okay? Anything else?
Well, thank you, Chief.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Chief Burgett, he could have come up with you too. All right, any other items
I
for?
have one very simple question for Mary. On 8B, and these are some text codes and changes to meet state law, but there's an updating language related to water and sewer line oversizing to reference the, quote, utility buy-in program private line agreement. What is that?
Thank you, Mayor and Vice Mayor. I'm actually going to ask, I believe, Representative Apodaca and Rachel to come up and discuss that with you.
It's just, the flag went up just because it seems like water resources, so I just want to make sure I know what we're getting into. The subdivision plats, yeah. And if you need to get back to me, that's fine too.
This one.
Welcome,
Vice Mayor,
Robert.
could I ask it, what page of the ordinance is that?
I didn't write that down in my notes.
That's
I can-
okay.
let me see if I can find it.
No, I can do a quick search for it.
It's just, private line agreement probably is the easiest search.
Vice Mayor Summers, Mayor, the buy-in program applies when, so by code, a development is obligated to build their infrastructure that's adjacent to them. But on occasion, what happens is you have to reach out to a connection point, say for water or sewer. Excuse me, and what happens is that additional could go in front of parcels that would utilize it. So you'd set up what's called a private line buying agreement on it. And if those parcels connected into it, they would have to pay their obligation.
To the line,
Yep.
okay. Are those parcels in the city or are they in the county?
It could be either.
It could be either. So we do have service delivery area for water and sewer outside the city?
That's correct.
Okay. That's what I'm interested to. Okay.
And if I may, Mayor
Yeah.
and Vice Mayor, we've had this concept in the code for a number of years. In fact, we changed it just, I think it was just a year or two in which we updated the code to create a greater flexibility, two different methodologies in which you can sort of determine. It used to be just driven by square footage, a linear feet, I think, along the roadway. But sometimes you have sort of like a flag parcel in which your linear feet along the roadway wasn't very much, but then you have a huge development back in the back. And so we created some flexibility. So we changed the code to allow for options and more equity in how you were able to calculate the buy-in agreement. It's similar to what many cities have this. We're not unique in this aspect. And so, I think we've always sort of just refined this concept to provide equity as far as the ability for someone that's maybe developing further out that draws all the major infrastructure, and then other people get the benefit of that as they sort of fill in. They effectively reimburse the first developer for the cost, and then that way also there's not this sort of chicken and the egg concept in which people are saying, oh, I'm going to wait till this other developer breaks ground and they draw the line. You don't end up with that situation.
And we had, now that you said that, I remember we had a case like this, I think it was on Warner Road, where the developer was extending the line down and there were other parcels that yet to develop that would be tapping into that line that would not have paid an equitable share in the price of installing that infrastructure.
Yeah, and that's what we changed a couple years ago to just make it more equitable.
Okay, now I know what we're talking about. Thank you so much. That's answered my question. See, it wasn't so hard.
Thank you, Rachel, for all the comments. So, Mr. Smith, on item 6A, we're introducing some ordinances, and that one's talking about a affirmative vote 3/4 because of a legal protest. Could you explain a little bit more
Right.
on the voting requirements there?
For the introduction, it doesn't, the 3/4 doesn't sort of come in, right? This is the introduction, and it's on consent. But when it comes back to you for the actual adoption, it will require 5 votes. And then you'll see, we'll actually, like we traditionally do, on the agenda language, we'll say 5 votes required, right? And so when you see it back for the next council meeting, actually it's setting it for July 1st, so you'll see it on the July 1st meeting. You'll see that one requires 5 votes. And the process for the having a legal protest, if you want, we can sort of discuss it at that time. It's a number of property owners that are basically adjacent to the property. And if there's enough of them by both number and property ownership, then a legal protest. We haven't had one for several years.
Right.
The state legislature really drives.
We've had them, but he's been withdrawn.
Oh, yeah, and so the state legislature changed the statute a couple of years ago, so it's not as common as when you see the legal protest, so we haven't had one for a few years.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any date on legal protests? Like if they did this 6 months ago or, like is there a time frame that they count or don't count?
So they have to, as I remember off the top of my head, they have to file it at least, I believe it's the Monday they have to file it the week before the actual adoption of the protest. I don't remember the exact day. I think it's the week before. And so, but as far as being earlier than that, I don't believe there is. There's no sort of, you have to do it, you can't do it sort of 6 months in advance.
Well, that's what I'm wondering if when a project is first announced and the neighborhood's upset and they do the legal protest and they get all the signatures and then time passes and things change and that still counts because it's on file. Does it expire at some point or anything?
I don't think we have anything. It's not in the state statute. And I don't believe we have anything in our code.
The neighborhood just has to pull it if they didn't want it anymore.
Correct.
It would still count even if it was from 2 years ago or something.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, I could double check it. I don't want to lock us in on 2 years. That seems extreme. I'd have to look at that. But
This isn't my district, so obviously I'm concerned when I see a protest with that many signatures, but I haven't heard from a single resident. Not one person has emailed me or talked to me about this. So, and I think a lot of them are winter visitors and have left for the summer. So they're not even here anymore. And then we're going to vote on it and they're not even here. Anyways.
I see the issue now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can look in the future to changing the code, but it's not there right now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on council? Okay, great. Then we'll finish that. We'll move over to item 2A, a presentation to discuss on Medina Station, a development including the proposed retail development agreements. Jay and Kelly.
Yes.
Medina Station.
Thank you, Mayor
Fill
and
us in.
Council. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jay O'Donnell. I'm the Economic Development Director for the City of Mesa. Joining me today.
Is your microphone on?
Yes.
Okay.
Joining me today is Kelly Whittemore. She is the Deputy City Attorney, and we are so excited to be here today to present this development agreement to you. Our purpose today is to just go through the background of the Medina Station project and the major terms and conditions for our proposed development agreement that provides the developer with a retail sales tax incentive for the reimbursement of public infrastructure. Also joining us today in the audience is Josh Simon. He's the developer on the project with Simon CRE. Just to orient you to the development, the location is just north of the US 60 and south of East Southern Avenue on the east side of Signal Butte Road. The total site is approximately 64 acres, with a third of it comprising of residential and 2/3 of it, or 40 plus acres, as commercial development. Just to give you a bit of a breakdown on the commercial development, it's 228,000 square feet of anchor retail space, including Target, Dick's Sporting Goods, and Boot Barn. There's another 18,500 square feet of inline retail planned, 33,000 square feet of full-service restaurants, and then 21,000 or just over 21,000 square feet of pad sites as well. So a total of 328,425 square feet of commercial development. The destination at Gateway, we were here in January with the zoning and current DA that exists. And today we're going to be talking about the DA project area, which is the area in pink or red. It's just the commercial area that the development agreement is on. So that's parcel A and B. So it's only the 40-acre commercial development, and it's a property owned by Target and Simon CRE. So the tax reimbursement is for public infrastructure for commercial uses, including the retail anchors, Dick's Sporting Goods and Target, and Restaurant Row. The parcel is oriented now, if you look at the bottom there, north is to the left of your screen. So we flipped it from the slide before. And part of this larger development, if you look at parcels C and D, that is residential that's proposed at 700 units. But if you just consider the commercial area, the full build out is $117 million of capital investment. So to drill down just a little bit further, we have the areas that are part of the development agreement. You have Restaurant Row in the blue. That consists of 5 commercial pads or restaurants, and then the retail anchors in the gold, which are Target, Boot Barn, and Dick's Sporting Goods. And I will turn it over to Kelly now to go through the points of the development agreement.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. This morning, we're going to go through the basics of this particular development agreement, and you'll get the opportunity at a later date to actually look at the agreement, and we'll discuss it more in detail later at the July 1st council meeting. But as a basic overview, so this is designed to be a reimbursement of taxes for approximately $6.36 million. Now, this is a reimbursement for dedicated public infrastructure that's based upon generated construction sales tax and public and retail sales tax. Now, in order to qualify for the reimbursement at all, we've set forth 5 conditions precedent that are laid out on the slide in front of you. The first is that 6 months from the effective date of the DA, which would be the day that the parties execute the DA, they have to obtain all of their building permits for the public infrastructure. They then have about a year to complete public infrastructure, which must be designed, bid, and built in accordance with applicable law, which includes Title 34. They have to dedicate that public infrastructure to the city and ADOT. I'm going to talk a little bit about that ADOT element in a minute because that's the first time we will have done one of these that includes another entity. After that, they give us our required dedications that deal with the public right-of-way, and then they must have Dick's Sporting Goods complete and open to the public within a 48-month time frame. Once those 5 things occur, then they are eligible to receive the construction sales tax and retail sales tax, and I'm going to break those down here in just a moment. To give you an idea of what that eligible infrastructure is, on the screen in front of you, you'll see highlighted in the red area is the public improvement depiction that's along East Southern Avenue and South Signal Butte Road. And then also to the right of that, you'll notice that there's a graded area that says ADOT property grading. That particular area is required by ADOT to be graded in order for certain drainage to take place. And this is the first time that we would be reimbursing for something like that. On this particular property, approximately 60% of that grading is attributable to the commercial portion of the property, and 40% is attributable to the residential portion of the property. Since we are not reimbursing or incentivizing the residential portion of the property, only 60% of those grading costs would be available to the developer to be reimbursed. When it comes to the other public infrastructure on Signal Butte Road and Southern Avenue, they would have the opportunity to have up to 100% of that reimbursed based upon a particular maximum reimbursement cap that is that $6.36 million.
Just to be clear, that reimbursement stops before the ADOT right away?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, yes. So if you look at the Medina Station residential property on there, the East Southern Avenue, there is no public infrastructure that's eligible for reimbursement that is on the north side of Medina Station residential. So it stops at the property line of the commercial development.
Yeah, there's ADOT right away on the Signal Butte Road that comes into the 60.
So
there wouldn't be any changes to that area, right?
Mayor, Vice Mayor, not to my knowledge, no.
Okay, great.
All right, so let's break down the 2 types of reimbursements that we have for this particular deal. So first, there is the construction tax reimbursement. For this, it is 100% of the 1.2% non-dedicated portion of the general fund sales taxes. When I say non-dedicated, that means the portion of the sales tax that is collected by the city that's dedicated to specific purposes. So there are 3, a street maintenance fund, a quality of life fund, and the public safety. That 0.8% is not eligible for reimbursement to the developer. The city holds on to that entire amount. But the remaining 1.2% would be something eligible for reimbursement. Now, there are 2, oh yes, please.
I have to go backwards, I'm sorry, because I
Please,
missed it, because it was all the way on the bottom. I was asking about the ADOT right away, and I see ADOT property drainage is eligible infrastructure.
So I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, so if you'll go back for me. So that portion, and I'll say it's on the right-hand portion of the screen that says ADOT property grading. So if I misspoke on that, that particular piece of property that's owned by ADOT, which does include some ADOT right-of-way, is eligible for just public infrastructure reimbursement that deals with grading that's attributable to the commercial portion of the property. So there is some drainage grading. If you need some more specifics, I know Robert Abudaca is in the audience as well as.
Is ADOT aware of this?
Yes, they will be entering into an encroachment permit with the state in order to do this, and the state is who is requiring this drainage to be done. And it's, I believe, Robert can correct me, this deals with the historical flows and the requirements that deal with drainage.
Okay. No, I just saw the city attorney nod his head that that's part of the arrangement. Okay, so that was my concern, is that we're getting into ADOT jurisdiction.
Yes.
So as long as those have been handled.
Yes, and that's something that the developer is required to work out with ADOT. The city is not a party to that particular agreement that they would do. And one of the elements of this particular agreement is that once that drainage grading is completed, then they're required to still have it owned and controlled by ADOT when it's finished in order to qualify for a public infrastructure reimbursement.
Okay.
But
I
that
see
is,
the other attorney's nodding as well.
yeah. So we have multiple in the audience today. Okay, so continuing on the construction tax reimbursement. So there's two pots of money that are available for construction tax reimbursement as we have structured this deal thus far. So the first is once they complete the conditions of the conditions precedent and Dick's Sporting Goods is open to the public, the developer would be eligible for a one-time payment of all the eligible construction tax that is collected by the city from the effective date of the development agreement through 60 days after Dick's Sporting Goods opens. This particular Dick's Sporting Goods is an 80,000 square foot, two-story Dick's Sporting Goods, so it is a higher level of retail store for them, so that's one of the things we wanted to incentivize in this particular agreement. If they are able to complete the conditions precedent and they get that first pot of money. In addition, if they complete all 5 restaurants that are going to be on Restaurant Row, then they're eligible for a second pot of money. That second pot of money will cover a larger time period. So instead of it ending 60 days after Dick's Sporting Goods open, the eligible period would go out until just after the 5th restaurant is open to the public. Now they have to complete all 5. If you only complete 4, then they're not eligible to get that extra money. And those restaurants have to meet very specific requirements. They're listed on the screen, but they have to be mid-class, high quality, or contemporary casual restaurants. Also, as of the DA effective date, there have to be fewer locations nationally. They have to be a first of their trade name in Mesa within a 10-mile radius of the actual property, except for Mesa Gateway Airport, because there is a particular restaurant that they're looking at that it occupies Mesa Gateway Airport. And I can let Jay speak a little bit more to what it means mid-class, high quality, or contemporary casual.
Mayor and Council, for that particular definition, just to give you some examples and what might qualify, that would be elevated brands like Old Oso Brewery, Cold Beer and Cheeseburgers, Blanco, and with the 10-mile radius included in here, we could even attract downtown restaurants that are one of a kind, like Espiritu or perhaps Rebel Wine, since they're interested in expanding.
Are those industry terms?
Yes.
Mid-class, high quality? Okay, so it's a well-defined term with examples that, we don't have to worry about debating later.
Yeah, that particular language came from our, I believe it's called the retail sales coach.
The retail coach.
Retail coach.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we were able to
Vaguely
get that.
familiar?
From them. Yeah.
Turned out to be useful.
Any other questions right now?
Do they want to
Okay.
get a little bit into the sales tax? So 1.2%.
Yes.
We have a 2% sales tax. So there are portions of sales tax that are not included in that. So what is that?
So
consist of?
mayor, vice mayor, when we talk about non-dedicated, those are the portions that just go into the general fund that aren't attributable to a specific item versus the dedicated are. So there is a 0.8% in total. 0.30% is the street maintenance fund. 0.25% is the quality of life fund, and 0.25% is the public safety fund. So that particular portion of the tax stays with the city. It is not something that's eligible for reimbursement to the developer. And that's true of both the construction tax reimbursement and the eligible retail sales tax reimbursement.
So the sales tax they'll generate on this, even if they make it, will still provide funding for public safety, streets, and the quality of life.
Yes, under those dedicated sales tax, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so the other portion of this was the retail sales tax reimbursement. Now, this is slightly different than the construction sales tax reimbursement. Under construction sales tax, they're eligible for 100% of that 1.2% of non-dedicated sales tax. Under the retail sales tax category, it's only half, so it's 50% of that non-dedicated sales tax. This portion, to be eligible for this portion of the reimbursement, it does require completion of the same conditions precedent. And from the day that Dick's Sporting Goods is open to the public, they will have a 10-year economic incentive period in which the retail sales tax that's generated by the retail anchors, so Boot Barn, Target, and Dick's Sporting Goods, and the restaurant row are eligible to be reimbursed to the developer. This is different than the construction sales tax because all of the construction sales tax that is generated by the project, so this could be the pad sites, it could be the public infrastructure, is eligible for the developer to utilize. This is very specific under retail sales to incentivize this type of business and development for the project. Now, I will say this does not require the developer to complete all of Restaurant Row. So in theory, the developer could not complete all of that. If they don't, not only would they not be eligible for that extra bucket of construction sales tax, but also it decreases the amount of the eligible taxes that we would collect that they could be reimbursed for. So it's to the developer's detriment to not complete Restaurant Row. Now, this type of agreement, two of them came forward to the council last year. The city doesn't do these very often. So just as a reminder, these have some statutory requirements attached to them because they are a retail sales tax incentive. There's two findings that the council is required to make. The first is that the proposed sales tax incentive, so the project, will raise more revenues than the actual incentive or the reimbursement that the city will be giving. We are required by statute to have a third-party independent economist review those particular numbers, and that is something that will be provided to the council. The final draft of their report will go to the council, and we will provide you with that along with the development agreement, so you can see that those numbers do match up. Also, the council is required to find that but for the reimbursement, the development would not locate in Mesa in the same time, place, or manner. And we do have the developer here if you'd like to hear a little bit about that particular requirement under the statute, how he can say how the incentive is helping his project.
Might as well.
Yes. Josh or Reese?
No, Reese doesn't want to come on.
Yes, he does.
Mayor, Council, thank you so much for your time. So what I would say on this project, and it's been great working with staff, is East Mesa and with the retail coach that you guys had hired to do a survey on the Longbow area. And I think this kind of showed that, hey, the East Mesa has to prove itself up. And what I mean by that is you've got a lot of pockets of demographics, some older growth, some lower income, you have some higher income areas, and to attract full service sit-down dining and Dick's Sporting Goods, we have to draw further, and we also have to offer incentives. So when you look at like Queen Creek, they have a lot of restaurants downtown, the Gilbert area, they have a really big demographic pool to pull from, and East Mesa just hasn't had that. And so what we're able to do, as an example, we recently signed a lease with Oso. We were able to offer, if you were looking at the same Oso deal in Queen Creek or Santan or Surprise or even Verado, the rents would be 30 to 40% higher. And so what we're able to do and what we got with Oso is, hey, come to East Mesa. We'll put our hat in the ring. We'll give you a lower rent. We'll give you better, more attractive deal terms. And so that's going to help attract the next several restaurants.
When do we show up to eat?
I know, I'm hungry. So we've already started construction. We delivered the Target building pad. We hope Dick's will start later this year. Where this one's a little different because the DA usually falls with, when we're closing and about to start construction. But, we've worked together and really appreciate the city's efforts to this point. And we look forward to opening the project starting in July of next year. And we hope Dick's Sporting Goods will be open for you to do your Christmas shopping next year.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Anything else?
A couple more items in terms of the requirements that the city must meet for the city council, in particular in terms of meetings that we need to go forward. So just so you're aware, you will have 2 council meetings in which you will look at this particular issue. The first is Monday night. This deals with a notice of intent that the city will be putting on the agenda for council's approval. The notice of intent, all it does is say the city council will be looking at this issue at a later date. It's not about the deal terms of the particular DA. We're just required by statute to let the public know that we'll be looking at this at a later date. That later date is July 1st. On the July 1st council meeting, We'll be looking at both a resolution for the approval of the development agreement as well as a resolution that supports those city council findings. And again, you'll have the opportunity to see that independent third parties review as well as the actual terms of the development agreement for that particular meeting.
Mr. Adams.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So you've already started construction before this is in place. If that's the case, that shows me your commitment to the project.
Yeah, and it's a bit of trust fall on our part, but we've really enjoyed working with staff, and we're excited to bring some great restaurants. One thing I just didn't add, if I may, the first time is this really offers an opportunity to prove up this part of Mesa. If you look at Longbow, you have not been able to get those sit-down restaurants. The trade area, you have nothing to the north, and even in Eastmark. So I think this is really going to help set the bar and lift East Mesa, because I'm very confident in the restaurant's ability to perform really well out here. It's a very underserved market when it comes to higher end sit-down dining options.
Well, it shows me you have skin in the game, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor.
Vice Mayor?
No, you kind of hit it there. I was going to correct you. The market study we did was for the entire city and not just for the Longbow area, but you highlight very well the challenges we have in East Mesa is that there are pockets of areas where there are some folks who are struggling that don't support this kind of thing. But then there are also some pretty high wage earners out in this area that are a little farther out, but we don't necessarily have all the rooftops we need quite yet. Growth continues, so getting these in early and having this kind of development is why we did the study. It's great to see that we're using the study effectively and it's paying off with trying to attract this type of retail use, particularly with the restaurants. I'm very much looking forward to it. I do want to, just a little word of caution. I've already had the conversation about, it's OSO, so you've already said it, so I can say it now, is in the terminal at the airport. I want to be careful that we're not competing in various regions, because we're also trying to do the same thing around Cadence and Eastmark and attracting restaurants. I'm assured that that's a different demographic that we're trying to hit there. So I don't want to put us into competition with each other on, especially when we're talking about putting city's money into the game too.
And Mayor, Vice Mayor, just in terms of distance related to that, again, the agreement requires that the restaurants that are brought to that particular property can't be within a 10-mile radius in Mesa of that property. That also is an exception because it's already located in Mesa Gateway
Yeah,
Airport.
no, I'm going.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to go right now and stand in line.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Anything else? Josh, I'll just say I was out in the community out in that area, and there was a family that somehow this has gotten out, and they were excited about Medina Station coming forward. And they were welcoming just a change in that area, an upgrade. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Kelly, back to number 7. I made a note there on the ADOT grading. Was there a certain percentage that was reimbursable on that?
So,
How did that work?
Mayor, the way we've designed it is because 60% of the entire Medina Station project is based off of the commercial development and 40% is residential, just in terms of square footage.
Got it.
We took the cost for the ADOT property grading and said that 60% would be eligible for the reimbursement. The other 40% would not, because that could be attributable to the residential portion of the property, because that grading is needed for both the commercial and the residential portion of the property.
Okay. That's what I thought I heard. Vice Mayor.
Real quick, I just remembered, I think there was a site plan change just recently on this because of the entranceway that lost a restaurant. Was that part of Restaurant Row, or was that something else?
If I can, Mayor, Vice Mayor, we do have a major site plan amendment that will be coming to council. They're losing Pad K, which was in front of the Dick's. It's not part of Restaurant Row. So
Okay.
it is just sits to the south of the yellow building, was where there was a drive-through that is being taken out.
It's a shame. Okay, great. I'm happy to see the Restaurant Row is intact. Sorry for your loss, though. I shouldn't be saying.
Anything else, Jay, Kelly? All right.
The last slide that we didn't cover was just the third-party economic impact analysis that was performed by Applied Economics. Kelly did say that you'll be getting that, so you can take a look at that summary in full, but it does look at projected sales tax, city tax revenues, public improvements, job creation, the labor income, and the construction activity. So if you look at what the reimbursement to the developer is projected to be at 6.36 million, the revenues to the city over the 10-year period to 2037 are 26.9 million. So you can see the revenues to the city far outweigh the reimbursement. And just to add one final thought, I think this particular development is a project that council and the city of Mesa can be very proud of because it checks so many of the boxes that we've been trying to accomplish with our retail attraction strategy. This is a catalytic development that offers a number of different amenities and anchors and something that's very unique and different with the Restaurant Row concept. So we think it's going to be a destination not just for Mesa residents who've been clamoring for this type of development and these types of brands, but also for the entire region.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Josh, for doing this. All right. We'll move on to the next item. Item 2B is a presentation and discussion on the Arizona Museum of Natural History. Simon and your team.
Okay, good morning, Mayor, Council. I'm Simon Tiffany Adams, the Director of the Arizona Museum of Natural History and Commissioner for the Arts. Today we have our consultant here from Gallagher Design and Associates, and it is Spencer Downey who will be presenting the work that we've been doing on. What I'd like to do before we kick this off is paint a picture for you. Look at the AZMNH as a nuclear submarine under the Arctic. It's cold, it's deep, we're down there, a crew of 18 of scientists and engagement specialists, and we've been working on a lot of groundbreaking stuff that will change the world. That's what we do. And next thing we know, I've got my captain's hat on and I'm going, Commander Butler, we're ready to come up. And the AZMNH comes flying out of the ice shelf, comes crashing down and slams down. That's today, what we're bringing to council today. We're that metaphor, that's where we're at. We've been working very hard for over 3 years to get to this point. I want to start off with just saying Arizona's history is American history. And what I mean by that is everything happened here first, geologically and culturally with people over time, over tens and tens and millions of years. What that gives us is we have a global advantage in a number of things. So I'm just wondering, let's move this up a bit closer. I was wondering, do you know that humans have lived here in Mesa and Sonora for tens and tens of thousands of years? We've had continuous human settlement here. We're one of a few places on the planet that have that. Right up from the ancient Sonoran desert dwellers, and to me and us that have just moved here recently, that is something that we can only claim here globally. That's a huge competitive advantage. The other one is, do you know that the Ice Age scientifically started here? The last global ice age around 10,000 years ago, and all that data lives here in Mesa and southern Arizona. We're a repository of that. That gives us another global and national advantage on the cultural and art stage that raises us up. We've been supporting our scientists and our engagement for over 40 years and intensively over the past 3 years. That support has looked like with technology, putting in collections management systems of our very valuable city assets, as well as strategic planning, as well as the master plan, which we'll be presenting today. We've partnered with the best museum consultant in the world. After a rigorous RFP, everybody wanted to work with us because we do amazing, great, transformative projects here in the city Mesa. So that was another huge investment that we made. One of the key things that we're going to find in this conversation is the facility is not up for purpose anymore. Basically, due to unprecedented population and economic growth, we are losing our competitive edge day by day. So here in the Valley, we have major investments coming in themed entertainment as well as culture. They are like the Arizona Science Center amongst many others that are commercial. So this investment is starting to be chipped away at over time. The other part is we've been outpaced. Our competitors are moving much faster than we are. And with the huge population growth and investment, that will continue to happen. So the last thing that I'm really going to say here, which is we are at a fork in the road as the City of Mesa and our cultural assets. And that's what will really be brought to council today. It is, do we continue to invest in the future of healthy communities, prosperity for all through this economic impact of large projects, as well as raising the City of Mesa up to the national and the global stage through excellence in science engagement. So those are the things that we will be going through today, and Spence will be walking us through. So at this point, and feel free, Mayor and Council, to jump in and ask questions as we move forward, but feel free to jump in. I'm going to hand it over to Spencer.
Great. Thank you, Simon. Mayor, council members, thank you for having me here today. I am here on behalf of G&A Strategy and Design. We are a fully integrated museum planning and design firm. We have worked on over 750 projects. We in 30 states, 24 countries, multiple awards, and we have been in this world for over 26 years. We've worked on natural history museums such as the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, the Whitty, the LA Nature Lab at the Natural History Museum of LA County, Edelman Fossil Park at Rowan University, Cleveland Museum of Natural History, the Bell Museum of Natural History, and other projects beyond natural history, such as Spy Museum, World War II, the Alamo, Pro Football Hall of Fame. So we have a wide range of clients and subject matters that we work in. So I'm here today to discuss or to present our findings from our report from last year. Our report looked at architectural planning, audience community engagement, research and collections, interpretive planning, educational programming, experience design, and business planning, and the business case for the museum, which is what I will be presenting today. We also worked with Jones Studio on architectural planning, Mimi Cantilla from the Whitty Museum, director for 10 years at the Whitty Museum, and Karen Wise, who was also at the Museum of Natural History in LA. So the big takeaway from our report, or from our findings, was that this is an important cultural asset for the city of Mesa. It's an important cultural asset for the people of Mesa. But right now, the facility is limited by issues with the space program and the footprint, which has inhibited and prevented the museum from truly reaching its maximum impact for residents, for tourists, and as a national institution. So when we looked at our findings, we did find strengths to build on. This is a dedicated staff, passionate staff, dedicated to the community and to serving the community. It is a museum with unique and tangible assets at its disposal. As Simon said, this is America's history. It's also has the brand recognition and brand name of being Arizona's Natural History Museum. You have an extremely strong resident base that has grown and continues to grow, and a very strong tourist base to draw from. And you have a reputation to your core audience that is beloved. But just foreshadowing, that core audience right now is limited, which we'll talk about here throughout this report. And the experience and the operational performance of the museum does not reflect those strengths right now. It does not reflect the extraordinary advantages you have being in a market like this and with the stories you have. It underperforms in terms of visitation, revenue generation, and experience offering. And relative to its national peers and its local peers, it is not offering what a best-in-class museum would offer. The building is not fit for purpose, and this has undoubtedly impacted the city's ability to maximize its return on the investment of the museum and the museum's ability to get a return on its impact through the community. We know this because we've looked at the market. We always look at who is living in the market and who's coming to the market first. That is our audience, and that audience is going to drive our attendance. So who is here locally? Well, locally, we have 65% of the state's population within a drivable distance, and we are at the center of that growth and that population being in the Valley Metro. That metro has grown, as you guys have, I'm sure know, by over 50% over the last 25 years, and it's expected to grow even more over the next 25 years. So to put that in perspective, Mesa and the Valley Metro of 2050 is a population center similar to Dallas is today, or Houston, or Philadelphia, which would be about the 5th biggest population center in the country, or metro population in the country. However, despite that large population, you are not capturing that resident base. And it's not just in these 3 museums that we're looking at on this slide that we're comparing us to, where we see we have this large local resident population and just this tiny sliver of capture. We did an extensive benchmarking, which we'll talk about in just a few slides, where we looked at 32 different natural history and science museums across markets of all sizes, and we ranked 10th in market size and 27th out of 32 in attendance. With tourists, like I said, we have a great opportunity with tourists. They're coming to Arizona, engaging in multiple activities, sports, outdoor tourism, entertainment, and recreational activities. One of the things they're not doing right now is coming to museums, likely because they are coming from places like Chicago, Los Angeles, Denver, Houston, places that have world-class natural history museums. So the experience as it currently stands does not offer a compelling enough experience for someone who's coming here as a tourist to say, I'm going to come to the Arizona Natural History Museum if they have the Field Museum at home or if they have the Houston Museum of Natural History at home. So we're not delivering on an experience that can attract tourists. So like I said, we have this great opportunity with this market, with residents, with tourists. We're not currently capturing them at the rate that we would expect for a market of this size. We have an opportunity to do so. We can provide a compelling experience, and we have an opportunity to grow with this market as the tech industry, semiconductor, aerospace, all grow as well. And we can grow alongside them and leverage those opportunities, as these museums often do, to work for partnerships and sponsorships and expanding the support from outside of the local government and local resident base to really take advantage and leverage those opportunities we have. So I mentioned benchmarking. We looked at 32 museums nationwide, natural history, science, and STEM centers. And locally, we looked at 12 museums within a 60-mile radius. We selected those based on market size, market position, total potential audience, subject matter. Of our 32 that we looked at for the Natural History Museum, or for the national museums, there are 2 very apparent weaknesses or challenges that we found. The first being that we do not offer, at the Arizona Natural History Museum, we do not offer the visitor amenities visitors come to expect at a world-class institution. Those amenities being food and beverage service. We are one of only 6 that did not offer food and beverage service out of those 32 that we looked at. We were one of 13 that did not offer an upcharge experience. That's an experience that is in addition to the ticket. And that was one of 13 out of those 32 we looked at. And just to put that in perspective, $9 average ticket price for those upcharges at those museums we looked at. Those upcharges capture about 25% of guests. If we had those type of upcharges, that's a 25% increase in your earned revenue. And that's just something we don't have currently and we're not offering. Lastly, this is a big one as well, is the private event space. We were one of 4 out of these 32 that we looked at that do not have private event space. That's not only leaving revenue on the table, but it's also losing opportunities to have guests come in for an event, see the museum, and then come back as visitors. And just underlining that, it's not just that we weren't one of those that had private event space. Those 29 that do have private event space, on average, they have 7 private event spaces that they're offering throughout the building. And that just speaks to how these are prioritized as key revenue-generating areas of museums, both natural history and locally. Locally, we're the only one out of 13 that we looked at who don't have private event spaces. We were one of 6 without upcharges. We were one of 5 without food and beverage offerings.
Okay, we have a question.
Just really quick on that. Does that fun rooftop area not count as private event space?
It did previously, but now we don't really have the capacity due to the facility to do that efficiently or in a business case. So we've done it as one-off, mainly as a one-off sort of event, but it's not sustainable with the current facility that we have, unfortunately.
Just meaning the actual physical facility isn't.
Well, yeah, the composite of the entire facility is really 2 buildings, so it's a hodgepodge of different spaces. So really to do a successful series of events, it's not really efficient or economical for us to be able to do that effectively. It takes way more resources for us to do one event than it would do as a business. So that's when it sort of comes back to the facility is not fit for purpose.
I've been to a couple events up there, and I think it's just such a fun, unique, lovely space. But you're saying you don't, like, it's not part of your program to rent that out.
Right now, but of course we would love to leverage that. And of course that is a huge asset and revenue earner for the city. But the amount of resources it would take to make that efficient for a business is an obstacle for us based on the actual facility build itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have an additional question. Mr. Adams.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I wondered the same thing, Councilmember Spilsbury. I recently had a tour and I thought, boy, this is a great space. But my question is, can you give us some examples of upcharges? Are we talking about like a virtual experience or an IMAX experience? Or what are those opportunities for upcharges to a visitor?
Mayor, council member, so those experiences would be exactly what you're referring to. So it could be a virtual reality experience, it could be a theater experience or a planetarium experience. If you think of ones that are local to here, the Arizona Science Center, there's a like a bike that you ride on a tightrope, which they charge I think $6 or7 for. They have I believe 8 upcharged experiences. So they are they are things that do capture about 20 to 30% of your visitors who walk in the door. So it could be any number of things. In the full report, we lay out some of those examples, but yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So just continuing on the point about upcharges, about private event spaces, food and beverage, as I mentioned, we're lacking that from a visitor experience perspective. It's hurting us with visitor perception and what is expected from our visitors, but it's also hurting us in terms of earned revenue. And you can see we have 3 earned revenue business lines at the Arizona Natural History Museum. And when we compare that to the local and national peers that we benchmarked against, they have 6. And not only does that hurt us with being able to diversify our revenue streams, but it's also hurting us in terms of earned revenue, pure earned revenue opportunities. As you can see, we are much lower than the average of the local and the national peer set. That's because we're not offering, in part, because we're not offering those type of earned revenue business lines, those upcharges, those private events, those food and beverage services. And this is affecting our ability to operate sustainably, efficiently, and as effectively as possible, and to generate that return on the investment for the city. So just again, in summary, we do not currently offer the amenities and the visitor experiences that are typical of a museum of this caliber and that a typical visitor would expect. And as we go into the building, to talk about the building a little bit more, I do want to also mention that the way the building is currently fragmented, it does not allow the research and collection, which as an active science research institution is something we'd want to highlight. It does not allow us to integrate that with the visitor experience or the educational programming, which ultimately is hurting our engagement with the public and preventing the public from being part of the great work that they are doing in the scientific research areas the museum is focused on in part of their mission. So clearly the museum, as we talked about, currently has some issues with the building. We know we lack the offerings and the amenities that you would expect. But what would that actually look like in a typical museum? So in a typical museum, we think of areas or 3 key areas of space: exhibits, public-facing amenities, those private event spaces, cafe, the lobby, retail, and then the last key areas back of house. And we think, in general, each of those areas make up about 1/3 of the total building footprint. So 1/3 for exhibits, 1/3 for the public, and 1/3 for the back of house. When we look at how we compare nationally to those comparables we looked at, the average of those national comparables was around what we would expect. About 37% of that space is used on exhibits. But at the Arizona Natural History Museum, we are over-allocated in terms of exhibit space. We are almost at 60% of our footprint being used for exhibits. And this is where we are losing out on the ability to have those public-facing amenities like a cafe and a private event space and a research and collection space that is able to be integrated with the experience. And if we look at some of the other projects we work on, we always want to think about the need of the market for how we design the building. At the Spy Museum in Washington, D.C., they're only at 20% of their allocation being experience. And part of that is because they have a great private event opportunity and more space needed to be dedicated to that. But in the experience, we still are, providing a dense, high quality visitor experience with immersive, digital and interactives, environmental treatments, and things that are compelling to a visitor both locally and nationally. The Bell Museum is another project we worked on, a more typical split distribution of the floor plan, about 30% on exhibits. It's a more traditional visitor experience for a natural history museum. It focuses on those macro artifacts, things like the mastodon you see on the screen, and it highlights or emphasizes the collection and artifact displays, while still incorporating those modern elements of thematic treatments, environmental and scenic treatments, and thematic lighting. So where does that bring us for the future of Arizona, the Arizona Natural History Museum? Well, our study looked at two options. Option one being a reorganization of the existing building and a renovation. And in this option, in order to create a efficient building space program and take back the space we need for public-facing amenities and the research and collection space, that would require reducing our exhibit space. The other option would be to build a new building. And in that option, we actually keep about the same exhibit space, but add in additional space for our amenities and for our back of house space needs. When we completed the report in fall of 2024, our projected cost for this renovation option was about $84 million all in. This works out to be about $1,100 a square foot. And this renovation option, like I said, it would bring us to a space program that is efficient and capable of increasing visitation and impact and revenue by offering those spaces. But that building's footprint will always be a limiting factor, being that it's 60,000 square feet. It's also reducing our exhibit space significantly, and it would make us the smallest exhibit space out of those 32 that we looked at. And that would limit your ability to do those classic natural history experiences like the scale skeletons, dinosaur skeletons, and Dinosaur Mountain. When looking at the new building development, this is an option that would bring us to that right-sized space, robust visitor experience opportunities and revenue generation opportunities, and it would allow the museum to pursue ambitious growth in the mission, impact, and research goals, and expand the audience reach much greater than just Mesa and the metro area. And that would provide, again, an experience that would be large enough for what is expected. It would fully enable that education space and integrate it with our research and collection space. And at the time of completion for this, of the study, this projected cost would be about $170 million, which would work out to be about $1,300 a square foot. So in comparison, both of these options do provide a path forward for the museum that would improve upon the current status. But that renovation option does come with the limitations. It will be a constricted space for the visitor experience. It will provide education and program space fit for the market today, but probably not for the market of tomorrow. When we talk about what Mesa will look like in 2050 and the Metro will look like in 2050. And it does not provide the research and collection space or the admin space that you would hope for pursuing our scientific goals. Whereas the new building does address these issues, and it addresses these issues not only for today, but future-proofs them for the Phoenix Mesa Metro of tomorrow. So in summary, our findings show, or our findings of our report show that a renewed AZM&H achieves the following impact for the city of Mesa. It creates a greater economic impact and greater job creation for the city. It becomes a more efficient and income-generating business model, an operating model for the museum, creates a transformative cultural asset for local residents, a distinct one-of-a-kind attraction for tourists, and elevates the museum on a national level as a natural history museum that is telling the stories that are so unique to Arizona and to the country and really to the planet when we think about all of the natural history that this state contains. And with that, I will turn it over to any questions or.
So I'll just quickly jump in here because I know you'll have a lot of questions, Mayor and Council. So we're here today to basically ask two things from Council, which is, are we going in the right direction or do we need to be going in another direction? The other part is moving on to our next phase of work. As you can see, we've been intensively working for 2 years. The next logical phase will be concept design and program design, as well as a full economic impact report. That would be happening over the next fiscal year that we're walking into right now. It'll be a very intensive piece of work. We're looking at somewhere in the vicinity of $600,000 to do that, of which we have about around 400,000, about 340,000 already secured through private funding. So that's what we're bringing to Council today. But before we go there, I know you'll have a lot of questions.
Ms. Pillsbury.
Yeah, I was just, this is so exciting to like dream about what this could be, right? When you talk about a new building, is that like an additional building or that's like take this down to the ground and build a new building in its place?
It's right now, it's exactly that. The would be on the existing site, and it's a very interesting proposition because it is a very limited site. So what would that look like? So in the dreaming phase, which is the beautiful phase of where we're at, it would probably go vertically up. It would be a high-rise. It would be an incredibly interesting building in the sense that we'd have conversations about, is it mixed use? Are there retail opportunities and stuff like that? From an experiential side and our science side, as you move through a building as such, you'd be moving through time. There'd be opportunities for us to look at having a large urban Sonoran park on maybe 2 or 3 floors. There'd be opportunities to have restaurants and so forth and really increase our revenue and things like that. That's where we're living right now. I think it's also important from an urban standpoint, and as an ex-city planner, you know, it's important that as we develop downtown, we invest in our cultural assets and the sinews that pull it all together. In these great cities, when you go to them and travel to them, they have a lot of great mixed uses and options for our visitors and also our residents as we come in. So we see the Asian NH as a flagship. Like if we're thinking of a mall, it's the Macy's. It's sitting downtown on McDonald, and it will sort of anchor downtown as a destination.
So the thought wasn't to go into like the parking garage next door or anything like that?
That's a great idea, but I think Jeff would kill me if we went there.
I know. So, I mean, I know there's a lot of like historic relevance to that building. And so like, did you look at historic preservation aspects to this? Because I know it is a Mod Podge of putting together and it's really old. So what are we looking at there?
We have had many conversations about the historic nature of the original building and building a new building. In essence, the one part of the existing building we'd want to preserve and would come up with options for that would be the territorial jail. Mm-hmm. That is something that people really do love and gravitate to, and it's actually really important. Mm-hmm. It was built, I think, in 1863, and it's something that we'd preserve. Would it be integrated into a new museum? I don't know. Would we employ it somewhere else where we could take more advantage of it? Highly likely.
Okay, and I'm trying to remember, there was no bond money for this museum on our latest bond cycle,
there wasn't.
Correct?
It's
Yeah.
an idea museum.
Okay, so anything moving forward, we would need to put on a new bond.
Correct. What we're looking at here is a 13-year legacy civic project. Is a 13-year project, and we're in year 3. So as we go through the phases of this, the next phase, which is really important, would be concept, program, and impact. And then we'd be ideally moving towards a bond very shortly thereafter, possibly next year. In working with the city, we would be looking at basically employing all the soft costs first, meaning all the design over the next 2.5, 3 years, getting to about a 70% place with that. At that point, we have actually been strategizing quite a bit about, and also consulting with other stakeholders here in the city, is that the question would be, the building would come down and we would not have a museum there for maybe 3 years. Part of our strategy in arts and culture would be, we would be basically setting up satellites and would still have a major presence downtown, meaning it could be a storefront and so forth. It provides a huge opportunity for us as a city to send our cultural assets out into the city where we know people want them. So we'll be looking at integrating them into libraries, rec centers, as well as, say, pop-up storefronts, an Eastmark out east and out west. I think that is a wonderful idea from a culturally, employing our cultural assets throughout the city. So that would be one strategy that we would use. So we keep our place in the market as well. Another strategy that we've actually about to launch is we've basically updated all of our education syllabus up to current standards through all grades. With the help of the Mead Family Foundation of about $300,000, we're now moving that out into the city with an outreach van. That is part of the strategy, is if we move into a large legacy project, our presence will be more widely felt throughout Title I schools, as well as micro schools and home schools, as a focus for revenue. So we have thought this through. We've had many conversations about how we can increase our service to the community while thinking about a large legacy project.
Okay, can you make a promise that there will always be a dinosaur coming out of the building?
There will be more dinosaurs. There'll be lots of dinosaurs. There'll be mastodons. There'll be cascading dinosaurs.
I feel better about whatever we do as long as that's still there. I mean, we know this is like the thing people talk about if they visit Mesa is the dinosaur museum. I mean, it has to be there, right?
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Salisbury, the dinosaur popping out of the building is the most photographed image in Mesa.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is special to us. It's placemaking. So yeah, more dinosaurs.
Okay, I'll stop there.
I can see.
Mr. Adams has a question. Yeah, go back to you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Simon, again, thank you for your gracious tour that you offered me. And it had been many years that I had been through that facility, and I saw more clearly the challenges with the facility. Dr. McCord works in a smaller building across the street with his team, and they're pretty tight in there. But I was very impressed with the collection of artifacts that the city has on hand. So I think you're right. I think you used the term tipping point. I think we're probably there with that facility. Mm-hmm. We either leave what we have, or we try to make that work, or we think bigger. So the only other comment I'd make is I liked the fact when you and I were speaking, you are looking at this from a revenue generating model. How do we pay for it? How do we add additional features that people may pay for? Coffee shop, other facility rentals, other things like this. I like that. I think that business model is falling in my space there. So I like the fact that you're looking at that. The challenge always is, how do we pay for it? Mm-hmm. So I like the fact that you're looking at sponsorships, corporate support, other means other than just public funding. So again, thank you for the tour. It was very informative, and I look forward to hearing more about where we could go.
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, thank you very much, and it was a pleasure.
Mr. Heredia.
I think just to piggyback on the last comment on how to pay for it, price tag is quite a bit, right? So do you have information on or discussion points on if you layer this with a capital campaign or, sponsorship, naming rights to just to figure out like how do you piece together this amount of money, right? As far as bonding and then a campaign that raises funds. I'm sure the other museums that you looked at. I don't know how if they ran these types of campaigns to provide space, and we've seen some of this with getting sponsorships like Idea Museum recently, just having some of these exhibits. And I'm sure on the museum front you have to lean into these sponsorships and making sure they're appropriate and those things. But I think there's gotta, at least for me, like figure out how do we piece together the costs, right? As far as, and so just curious how successful, or is there a market to create such a campaign that helps fundraise for this type of project?
Mayor, Councilmember Heredia, I'll do my best to answer both questions. Yes, I think we're going to have to think a little bit differently about funding large civic legacy projects like we have before. I think a more healthy model is a split between government funding and non-government funding. When I was working in Qatar and Doha, I worked on two large projects. One was with Volkswagen, and they were very, very different. And there was a split of resources on a project that was around 3 million euros. We were both contributors, and we both supported that project, and it was innovative. And working with a corporation, we actually had access to a lot more resources, information, IP, and technical knowledge that we would have if we were working traditionally in the sector. So I think as we move forward and we want a healthy, sustainable city investment, I think we'd be looking at those types of funding for this project. So those conversations are in development now as a team, working with Dawn in development and with Candace and Ilya as we move forward. So we are thinking quite laterally about this and not thinking solely as city funding.
Any examples of other museums that upgraded their buildings? Is there?
Yeah, definitely. Mayor, council member, there are countless examples of that. Some of the projects that we've worked on recently, the Cleveland Natural History Museum, that was about a $250 million total capital raise or total capital budget, and about 70% of that was through a bond, and then the other 30% coming from sponsorships, foundations, corporate sources. Fossil Park was a museum that was worked with a university, the Rowan University, but also had a major benefactor in Rick Edelman, which is the namesake of the project. The Olympic Museum, which is a museum we opened a few years ago, that was paid about 70% private, 30% through Colorado Tourism, the Colorado Tourism Department of Tourism. So, and those are just a few examples, but yeah, we are always looking at how do we, use as many sources of capital as we can and make sure that we're reaching all of our opportunities.
Mayor, Councilmember Heredia, when I was working in Los Angeles, the project for that was around $220 million. That was a 2/3, 1/3 split between a federal bond, and the other third was fundraised over about, I was there about over 8 years to support that project.
Vice Mayor.
This report is reminding me of another report that had the exact same conclusion related to tourism, and that's the convention center. So we have a convention center that doesn't meet the standards of today's visitor. We have a museum that is falling behind. We're falling behind. And there's just not enough capital to provide all that. So we need to start having some serious discussions. I assume I see the chair of Visit Mesa is out here. Have we had discussions with Visit Mesa, DMA, and some of the other nonprofits about this? Poor Simon. I'm throwing him off.
I'm good.
Mayor and Vice Mayor Summers, yes, that's what we're here today is really to talk about. Are we going in the right direction? Because that is the next step, right? The next step is to actually go into programming concepts and start looking at what those stakeholders, capital campaigns, what that would look like, and starting to strategize those, and then bring those back. So the goal would be when we come back, we're coming back not just with the concept that excites us, right, which is the programming and the dinosaurs coming out of the walls and all that type of thing. That's great and exciting. We're also coming back with the economic impact study. We're also coming back with potential funding mechanisms.
Okay,
And
so
so
we could-
all of that would be coming back at the same time.
The discussion of having a multi-tiered capital stack is incredibly important to this because we can't be footing the bill for the whole thing. So we,
Mayor, Vice Mayor,
Sugar
absolutely.
Daddy would be great if we could find one. We have a billionaire in the state, right? So having going after the benefactors, the new revenue streams are all going to be important. But I think it's getting toward time where this needs to be basically a multi-organizational task force that includes the visitors, Mesa visitors, the city of Mesa, citizens, the boards, because a lot of our tourism infrastructure is falling far behind, and we need to start thinking about how we want to organize that.
And Mayor and Vice Mayor, I would say this particular project is not just a Mesa project, right? And when we talk about this is the Arizona Museum of Natural History, not the Mesa Museum, right? So this is the Arizona
Beautiful.
Museum, and there's a reason for that, and that's because Arizona is very vital to, as Simon pointed out, just the history of culture, the history of geologic events that have happened. It happened here. It happened in Arizona, and specifically it happened in Mesa. So we see this as really a statewide project, statewide capital campaign that we would be bringing everybody in to create the Arizona Museum of Natural History.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It was great to hear Arizona getting blamed for the Ice Age. Thanks a lot.
Well, but Mayor and Vice Mayor, I mean, I think it really is, we're at that point where we have to take a step back and say, why are we doing any of this? Why are we having these discussions? The investments that we've had in the Idea Museum, the ongoing capital investments that we have at the MAC, obviously the discussion we've had about the convention center, and it all has been anchored around what does this arts and innovation district mean for economic development in Mesa? What are we as a community looking to build off of in downtown, and obviously the ripple effects that will have throughout our economy and throughout the Southeast Valley. And so I think that's really the question that council's going to face. And yeah, we have had those discussions to push Simon and Ilya and that crew really hard to leverage capital, private investment, find creative ways to go out and bring in additional capital into these projects. But at the end of the day, too, we know it's going to require a substantial public investment, not just the Natural History Museum, but for all of those assets. And I think that's going to be part of the challenge that we have as a council is really fleshing out what are those priorities, what does that phasing look like, how do we leverage those cultural anchors along with Arizona State University and our other assets in downtown to really make it that district that we have hoped and talked about for over a decade. I know that the mayor and I were at a group yesterday, and this was a lot of the discussion that group was having. It was investors, private and public, in downtown, and it was, what's the next steps? And it was a lot of discussion about our cultural institutions and the convention center, and in addition, of course, to our ASU partnership. So that's going to be our challenge, and there's no easy answers for this because certainly the ask are probably more than the capacity that we have. So how are we going to phase this? How are we going to bring in other investment? How are we going to use creative financing? All those kind of things that we can look at to deliver these projects.
Ms. Spilsbury.
Yeah, I mean, this will come as no surprise that I will voice my support for arts and culture in our city. I think besides all of the economic impact, which I think we very easily can find proof of, this is quality of life. This is why people want to live here. And life is nothing without our arts. I feel like I'm going to cry again. I'm going to try not to. I mean, this is what makes life so beautiful and brings meaning to it all. So I love what's happening at the Idea Museum. I love what's happening at the Mesa Arts Center. I think the partnership with ASU adds to that. I think having the convention center as a draw to this area will be impactful. I mean, we're on the cusp of what could happen in this area. We're already headed that way, but so I do think there are a lot of ways that we can find partners on this. And like you said, statewide, like that's exciting. That's exciting. I mean, people are coming to this museum statewide, so I think we can find different ways and creative ways to be able to fund this. So I'm super excited about this. I know it's going to be a lot of work, and you guys have already put a ton of work and passion into this, but this is really, really exciting for me.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, do you want to weigh in?
Just a quick one. Mr. Butler, I think you summed that up really well. I think those are the challenges that are in front of us, and I look forward to more information. One thing for when you come back, I'd like to know a little bit more about when we go out and find let's say we were fortunate enough to find a $25 million naming rights sponsor for some of this project. What do we give up? What do we have to give up in turn for that? In turn for the check and the name on the building? And it might be all good, but I'd just like a little more information on that. And I think that I would be supportive of if we decide to go in the partial public funding direction. I think it's important that that be a part of a bond that the voters will be able to weigh in on. So. You come back later with that information.
Mayor, Councilmember Adams, I can answer that. There is no real give up when we go into partnerships, say, with a corporate entity. There's actually a lot of huge advantages. I think this normative way is there would be a name on a hall or a building, you know, the Meta Gallery of Origins, whatever. But I think what we have to gain, if we think in a new paradigm, is we're building long-term legacy relationships with important stakeholders within our community. And when I say that, it's not transactional. We want to get to a place where we're sharing resources, meaning IP, knowledge, connections and stuff like that. I learned that lesson when I worked with Deutsche Bank and Volkswagen in the Middle East. I had huge access to a lot of resources that I never would have had if it was purely a transactional Volkswagen on the name and the side of the building. So I find this kind of place exciting. I think it makes our projects richer, deeper, more connected to our communities in new ways that the sector is not willing to go in. One thing that we're very much ahead of the curve in regards to natural history museums. We lead with our science, we lead with our ethical stewardship of Indigenous collections, and we also lead with who we are and what we are. So we want to be a hub of discovery, discourse, and positive action. So we're moving from a place of just going and seeing and engaging. We're moving to being a civic hub where we can go and basically learn how we want to learn by who we are in a respectful, safe place. And we're really moving the sector forward. So if we're doing it that way in our mission, we'll do it in every way, I think, as a city-owned enterprise.
Well, thank you. I just some closing thoughts here. So your ask is what? You want to move forward, and I'm getting some round numbers here. You're looking at $600,000, is that an ask there? And you have $340,000 saved up, so you need $260,000 more to move forward. Candace, is that roughly it?
So Mayor, yes. So at the end of the day, that's our ask, is to move forward, similarly with what we did with the convention center, where we move into the next phase.
The conceptual part.
The concept, the programming, the economic impact study, possible financial, that whole kind of package would all be in that next section. And right now so the ask is the 250 to close that gap on what we have already with, whether it's grants or the foundation that's helping us out.
And the money comes from where? The 250?
The money would come from the general fund.
General fund.
As one-time funds.
So council knows that, comes from the general fund. You know, I just, on slide 18, I was looking at all the different comparables there, and I attended probably 9 to 10 of different museums, and from Northern Arizona, I really like going to the Museum of Northern Arizona. And they have different types of branding and things that I enjoy, and that's why I go to these different types of museums. I think we do have a great museum here. There's a Museum of Natural History. We have a great foundation here. We need to build off of it. Walking through the building, knowing that years ago, there was a big hole in the ground to build the museum that we have today, a basement, and then so forth. And there's a lot of things that are just need to be updated technology-wise. Things are moving forward really fast. The thing that we have to really understand is how we want to move forward effectively in the future, because you're asking for a $170 million new building versus an $84 million perhaps bill just on a renovation. But then if you tear down everything and then you want to build a new building, I mean, we have to find different ways, because I don't want to create a lot of indebtedness to our community, through bonds and such. And I think it's up to your foundation chair to raise the rest of it. Who's your foundation chair?
It's got to be Dennis.
Mr. Kavanaugh. Can you come up with $84 million, Dennis?
Write the check tomorrow.
Okay. But I just think it's important. This is part of our museum, our history, our arts and culture here in our community, and I endorse that. But we have to have some way in from different entities so that we can make this a world-class facility. I think you find agreement here on council. We have 2 council members missing that I know that would endorse this as well. But we need to look at how we can make it reasonable. So give us some timelines, Candace. What are we looking at if you get the 250? So you're hearing getting the 250 moving forward, and
then we would be back. So Spencer, can you kind of give an overline of what that next, or either one of you, just an overview of what that next timeline would be?
Sure. Yeah, Mayor, Council. The timeline will again be hyper fast, like the previous master planning. We would head into an RFP over the next 2 months for the scope of work for concept, program, and impact. Hopefully, we'd be starting in the end of September on that work with a consultant. We'd be moving through to complete a lot of this work by the end of February, early March, for consideration to move onto the GO bond, meaning that it would come through to council in May. So again, we move very fast. We're thorough. We handle very complex ideas, and especially what's come up from council today, that we would deal with and would come back to council with more detail early next year about, 1, what the building would be and do, 2, possible financing of this building moving forward.
thank you. I think you have consensus on council to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Item 2C is a presentation and discussion allowing park model recreational vehicles and manufactured homes as accessory dwelling units. Rachel, Mary, who's leading off?
I will. Good morning, Mayor and Council. So Rachel Phillips, Assistant Planning Director, and with me today I have Sean Alexander, who is our Fire Marshal, and John Sheffer, who is Deputy Director of Development Services, but also our Chief Building Official. But we're here today to talk to you about the possibility of allowing park model recreational vehicles and manufactured homes as accessory dwelling units. And to start off with a little bit of background, Mesa has a long history of allowing ADUs. They've been permitted within the city since approximately 1939. And as you can recall, we've done a few text amendments of recent, both to promote them as a tool for affordable housing, but also in response to some state legislature that was passed. Also recently, City Council adopted some amendments having to do with manufactured home and recreational vehicle subdivisions, in which the council approved the allowance of allowing conventional construction within those subdivisions. But during the process of developing those amendments, staff went to the cultural and the Community and Cultural Development Community to discuss those amendments back in February. And as part of that discussion, the committee had asked that we come back and discuss with them the possibility of allowing the park models and the manufactured homes as ADUs. And at that meeting in March, they recommended that this be brought to the full council for discussion and consideration. So before we get into some of the details, we just wanted to go over what is currently allowed today to be used for an ADU. So we allow conventional construction, just like what you would see with your typical dwelling unit, which is built on site, and it is built according to our International Residential Code and inspected and provided a certificate of occupancy by the city. We also allow factory-built dwelling units to be used as ADUs as well. And these are built in factories and assembled on the site. They still follow the International Residential Code, but they're regulated by the Arizona Department of Housing rather than being certified by the city. So today, we wanted to discuss with you the potential of allowing a couple of other different housing types as ADUs. The first one of those would be a park model recreational vehicle. These are built in the factory and moved onto site. They are built to American National Standards Institute, ANSI is the abbreviation, their standards. And they're titled through the motor vehicle department since these are on a chassis with wheels. And then the other type is a manufactured home. Once again, they're built in the factory and moved on site. These are built to Housing and Urban Development Standards, HUD standards, and they receive Arizona Department of Housing approval for these. And I am going to pass on to Sean now to discuss some of the different design and safety considerations with these different types.
Thank you, Rachel. Good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is Sean Alexander. I am the city's fire marshal. I was asked to come to speak today as a result of a question that was brought up in one of the previous committee meetings, talking about the differences in the design and standards of a park model RV versus a manufactured home. I did a rather exhaustive amount of research on trying to find results of laboratory testing that could definitively say whether one type of housing was riskier than the other, more dangerous than the other. We reached out to our federal partners at the National Fire Research Laboratory. They were not aware of any large-scale testing that has been done to show the whether one will burn faster than the other. What I do have are, I have a study from the NFPA, the National Fire Protection Association, that I'll describe here in a minute. And then because there was not the results of independent laboratory testing on these large-scale units, we really went to the standards that these units are built and designed for. The main issue with park model recreational vehicles when compared to a manufactured home is that they are not designed to be permanent dwelling units. They are designed for recreational use for either temporary or seasonal living. They are meant to be used as a recreational vehicle, and that's how they're designed and built. They're not built to primary dwelling standards and the level of fire protection features that you would find in those based on either the HUD regulations, the federal HUD regulations, or the International Residential Code that Rachel mentioned previously. Some of the differences, because these are RV standards, not housing standards that these park model recreational vehicles are built under, they just have a different set of requirements than what you would see in a normal house. As an example, they require less smoke detectors. They have more limited requirements for flame spread on the surface materials. They have different exit requirements. as well as just generally being more lightweight to allow these park model RVs to be transported on the road and used in different locations. When it comes to the fire safety standards, the ANSI standards that, well, let me back up. In order to be certified as a dwelling unit, RVs are exempted from HUD regulations, which cover manufactured homes. In order to meet those requirements, they have to be built to the standard that Rachel mentioned earlier, the ANSI standard, or NFPA standard, which applies more to self-propelled recreational vehicles. The ANSI standards are very different from the HUD standards because they cover a much wider, much more diverse set of vehicles that can fall under these standards. It could be a fifth model RV, trailer, It could be a park model RV, as we're discussing. These standards also cover regular motorhomes, as you would see that are driving down the road. So they're just different standards that they're built to. And when it comes to fire risk, the main challenge when it comes to fire risk is using these park model RVs outside of the nature with which they were designed, which is for temporary or seasonal living. A HUD home, a manufactured home, is designed for permanent living, permanent dwelling, and has those associated safety features built into it. Some of the challenges that we see with park model RVs, because they are designed for temporary living, they are, as I mentioned earlier, they are a little more lightweight, and they are to be permanently mounted on a chassis with wheels, so they are designed to be moved. Could we go to the next slide, please? Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go back. One thing that HUD, the federal government has been developing these standards going well back into the 1970s and 80s. And it's evolved over years to the rules that they have now. In order for a recreational vehicle to be exempt from HUD regulations, they need to meet several requirements, square footage size, mounted on a chassis. But because the federal government did not want to get involved in over-regulation of recreational vehicles, one of the requirements that they've added to HUD standards in order to allow these park model RVs to be built to an ANSI standard is that at the point of sale, the manufacturer has to provide the customer with a written notice that is quoted on the slide here, differentiating that this recreational vehicle that they are considering purchasing is designed for recreational use and not for permanent occupancy. That notice must be provided to all, by the manufacturer to anyone who is looking to purchase one of these homes in order for that RV to be exempted from HUD standards. What happens and how that park model RV is used once the person purchases it and decides to move into it, that is far outside the scope of the HUD standards. That they didn't want to regulate the use past the point of sale. And to meet that, they put in a requirement that each person who is looking to purchase one of these park model RVs needs to be notified that in writing at the time of sale that this RV is not designed for permanent living. So when we talk about park model RVs that are built to the ANSI standard, these standards have many safety requirements in them to ensure that RVs are safe for temporary or seasonal living, but they are less than what we would see in our normal HUD or residential codes. They only require one smoke alarm for the entire vehicle, unlike under HUD standards where you are required to put a smoke alarm outside of each sleeping area. It requires a minimum, the RV standard requires a minimum of 2 exits only out of that RV. That could be either a door, the primary exit has to be a door, but that second exit can, depending upon how the RV is designed, can be a window, it could be a roof hatch. And the requirement is only that to get to that exit, should the RV catch fire, that you have a path of a minimum of 13 inches wide to get from the sleeping area to that exit. That is the minimum design standard. So these are smaller units, so you have less distance to travel to the exit, but that distance is more narrow and could potentially be something other than a door that's easily stepped out of. The interior walls and the ceiling materials, I can go into more detail if you have questions about them, but they are tested to a certain flame spread index, which is independent lab testing for things like the surfaces around the cooking area and around the heating areas, which per an NFPA standard, a study that was done back in 2013 showed that in manufactured homes, I'm not speaking to park model RVs, I'm speaking to manufactured homes compared to single family residents at this point. The number one cause of fire was in the cooking and or heating areas of the house. So the requirements for manufactured homes are slightly different than IRC. They are very different for the ANSI standard that the park model RVs are designed for. Specifically in the ANSI regulation, because these are RVs that have a different style of cooking and or heating units, some of these RVs are built to use propane, some are built to use natural gas. They vary a great deal, but because these are small spaces and they're vented differently, there is a warning specifically in the ANSI standard that speaks to the increased risk of asphyxiation by using this cooking equipment without providing adequate ventilation. So I'm pulling this straight out of the ANSI standard. They say very clearly these are not homes and there is additional risk. You need to ensure before turning on your stove that you have proper ventilation throughout the RV to minimize the dangers of asphyxiation. And then when it comes to fuel load and or fire behavior within a park model RV, they do have those flame spread requirements pertain to the surfaces around the cooking area and above it. They may apply to the heating and furnace area, depending upon what type of furnace is installed in this. They may not have any flame spread requirements if it vents directly out to the outside. So these are just built with different safety requirements than what you would see in a regular home. And I can go into more specifics if you have more questions on those.
I think we're good there. Ms. Spilsbury?
I'm not good there. I am wondering why we have thousands of people in our city that live in these as their permanent residents, if you're saying that these are not permanent residences.
I'm saying they're not designed to be used as a permanent residence.
So I'm slightly frustrated because, Mary, I've had so many conversations over the last several months. I've done unbelievable amount of research into this. We've driven out to Glendale to go to the Park Model factory. I've been inside of them. This was never brought up. Like, not even one single time did you guys mention this part, that this was a temporary structure and that that's why you're opposed to it. I've been begging for a reason why you guys are opposed to this without a good answer. And now, right now, you're throwing this at me. One of the frustrating things has been I need to take a breath. Okay. One of the frustrating things has been the terminology behind all of this and what we're calling different things. And park models, to me, are not the same as an RV that you drive around the country, but I understand you've explained to me why we have to call it a park model recreational vehicle. But I've been in the kitchens. They look exactly the same as they do in the manufactured homes, as they do in the, what are we calling them? The factory built ones, the modular homes. Like, I just think there's still an issue with some of the definitions of what these are, and I know we have that page in the back that says summary of housing types that you guys spent a lot of time on and that we approved to clarify like what all these different things are. Anyways, I just threw a lot at you, but I'm frustrated.
No, Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, I understand. And I think one of the reasons we put this slide in is because probably one of the most important lines on this is the code that the different types of housing have to follow. And I think that based on what we heard from the committee back in March, Sean has done an extensive amount of research, and it was a lot of research that took a lot of time. So I didn't necessarily, when you would ask me, like, is staff opposed to these or not? It's not that staff is opposed to them, but there are some safety concerns that Sean, as the fire marshal, has raised. Those are different than the concerns that planning may have. They're different than the concerns that John, as the building official, may have. But after Sean did this extensive research, this is what his findings were. And so if you look again at the building code that they follow, RVs, the things you drive around the country or you attach to your truck, and park model RVs follow the same code, and that's the ANSI standards that have been mentioned. Manufactured homes follow the building code of HUD, so those are the standards that they need to follow, which are a little bit elevated in what Sean has been able to find in his research. And then factory-built homes, and I'll say something like a Zenny home or a conventional construction, they have to follow the International Residential Code. So those are the three different tiers of the codes that have to be followed. And I know you have asked me, why is it that staff seems to be opposed to these? And I think some of the research that Sean did just shows that there are different safety concerns. And I can't speak to whether the look of them means that they are the same as what you see in a manufactured home or what you see in a conventionally built home. What I would say is, based on the research that Sean has done, and I think him and John can probably speak to the building materials that are used far better than I can, that there's a different type of material. So I know one of the things Sean has said to me is because of the chassis, they have to be built with lighter weight materials. So for example, while you have a 2x4 in a house, you may have, I think you said a 2x3 in a park model. So they look the same from the exterior, but from the construction standpoint, they're a little bit different. And I don't know, Sean and John, if you want to maybe elaborate a little bit on some of that.
If I could I'm just going to say really quick, this is my fault, but because of my life, I didn't get a chance to look at these till 10 o'clock last night. So this was a big surprise to me at 10 o'clock last night, and I couldn't do anything about it at 10. So I would like to do some of my own research because I'm hearing different things. I appreciate, believe me, I don't mean to say that I don't appreciate how much work you've put into this. I'm just hearing different things from people in the industry.
Understand.
So I would like to still look into this more on my own because I'm just hearing different things.
And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about these standards that I have researched. This is not my opinion. All I am presenting to you is the federal standards that the industry has worked through for decades on this. This has evolved over years and years. The RVs have been exempted from the HUD standard going back to the 70s and 80s. Some of that was at the request of the RV industry. Some of that was based on citizen residential feedback to federal rulemaking and comments that were raised. I'm not going to sit here and say to you that I have any research that says that one is more dangerous than the other. All I am saying is that they are designed for different uses. And using them outside of their designed risk requires that the manufacturers provide these owners with proper notification. That's federal law. This is not my opinion. This is how the industry has evolved over the years.
I would have appreciated, since I've been working on this extensively for 3 months, a heads up that you were throwing in something into a presentation that I thought I already knew. I would have appreciated a heads up on that.
Let's tie two more questions here. Mr. Reddy and then Mr. Adams.
Yeah, just looking at the summary housing types, you make a distinction between park model, rec vehicle, and recreation vehicle, but within the details, there's no distinction. So is there nothing that distinguishes them from each other? Because you're in what you're saying, Chief, is they're all this, like the rec vehicles and park model vehicle, recreation vehicles is the same that you all see this, but when you see them, they don't look the same, right? Like it's just the obvious visual aspects. And
Side by side, a manufactured home looks very similar to a park model RV.
But within the rec vehicle and the park model rec vehicle, you're combining them as one and the same in your presentation, but when you visually see them, they're not, right? And so.
That is correct.
So is there any distinction there based on, because it does seem there is some based on how they look, right? But in your explanations, you're saying they're not.
So a park model RV is included in recreational vehicle design standards. Again, that's how that evolved. Going back to the 70s and 80s, they were specifically exempted from HUD regulations, which is what covers manufactured homes. They took all recreational vehicles out of those federal standards, and the industry, the Recreational Vehicle Industry Association, actually created this ANSI standard that covers anything, to your point, that is self-propelled to non-self-propelled park model RV. You have very extreme, it's a very diverse type of structure that these standards, these RV standards, are designed to cover. Something that has its own engine and wheels and a steering wheel, and including a park model RV. It's all the same standards. They can be either, the manufacturer can either certify these vehicles under the RV standard, the ANSI standard, or they can elect to certify something with a steering wheel and is self-propelled. Also brings in NFPA 1124, which speaks more clearly to the self-propelled RVs. But they both apply regardless of whether it's a Class A, Class B, or Class C motorhome, all the way through a park model RV. They fall under the same design standards. And the industry, going back decades, sought out these exemptions from HUD regulations so that they could have the flexibility to build a Class A RV or a park model. HUD also chose years ago to exempt fifth wheel trailers, which are much larger than what you might see potentially than a standard park model RV or a camper trailer, things like that. So fifth wheel trailers are also exempted from the HUD standards. But when you go down these regulations and start following them, each industry is covered by different regulations, and they vary in the design requirements and the safety standards that must be included in these designs. So I'm not saying that park models are not safe to live in. I'm saying that's not what they were designed for permanent living. They have safety features built into them to limit the spread of fire around the cooking area. Depending upon the type of furnace and heating equipment that they have different surface requirements for these RVs. Sometimes it's comparable to what you would see in HUD built, sometimes it's absent. So it's very different on what is required to be put into these and how they're designed. They may look very similar from the exterior, but in the interior, the surfaces that they use to cover the countertops, for example, the areas around the stove, they're different standards, and they have different levels of safety.
I guess, is there a distinction then, just looking at the rec vehicle to park model rec vehicle? Is there a distinction in that industry on how you build those pieces? Because it does seem the park model rec vehicle to seem a little bit more permanent than the rec vehicle that you drive around or you pull to the sand dunes or to where camping site, right? Like the park model rec vehicle, you won't be pulling that to the sand dunes or to the camping grounds, right?
Correct.
It's a more manufactured home or factory built home that you'll locate at a back of your house, if we agree on this, or at a mobile home park, right? So it
is easier to live in. You generally have more space than you would a self-propelled RV, but they are both designed under the same standard with the same safety requirements.
There's no levels of
no, sir, there is not.
on the rec vehicles. There's no levels of different types.
No, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, and Mayor and Council, I just want to clarify that for today's discussion, we're not proposing the recreational vehicle like you see with the travel trailer. It's just the park model to be considered as an ADU. But there are differences in the way they're designed, the aesthetics of them, and park models have a specific size requirement that they follow.
And just to tack onto that, if you look at the slide that's currently on the screen, there is a concept of a tiny home, which is it's not necessarily a term that's spelled out in this RV standard, but it is. We are seeing more and more of these smaller homes that are being built. Depending upon the standard that the manufacturer decides to use to build these tiny homes, which are generally 300 to 400 square feet, they can fall under either the International Residential Code as a just like a single-family dwelling. They can fall under the HUD regulations, just like a manufactured home, or they can be built to RV standards. These tiny homes kind of bridge all three, and so they're an even more, not complex issue, but you really need to be sure what was this home designed for and how is it used.
Let's move over to Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I don't envy you. There's a lot to unpack here, and apparently a lack of a lot of information that would have made your work here easier. So, and I don't think this tiny home issue is going to go away. I think we're going to see more of it. So, I'm just feeling like I need a lot more information than what we've been able to develop here. But I do have a question for Mr. Smith. Can we go back to that slide that has that notification? So, does the city have any liability if we allow park models for permanent residential use, knowing that this manufacturer's notice is in place? Are we, if we were to do this, is the city liable if something were to happen and there's a loss of life or property? Are we facing some type of a claim saying, hey, you knew that this notice existed, yet you allowed the use? Is there a liability to the city here?
So Mayor and Council, and I can never give you definites on liability, but I'll say when you adopt the ordinance, it's going to be a legislative act, and we're going to defend and say it was a choice of the council as a legislative act. How people actually use it, I mean, people might use it that way, or they might use it for their mother-in-law that visits during the winter, and so very well may be used exactly as it's intended to be used. And so I can't say how each one is going to be utilized. And we also have heard that we're not even exactly sure, there's not been scientific sort of analysis as to how they rate as far as safety. But I would say it's a legislative act, and we'll defend on that. And so I can't foresee all the innovations of plaintiffs' attorneys. But no, I think we will have a very strong defense to any potential liability.
We currently, oh, sorry.
Well, I'll say it depends, but I think I can't say that people won't bring claims or won't bring lawsuits, but I feel that we should prevail.
No, I interrupted, so Mayor, I need to ask you if I can speak, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
We currently have thousands of people living in a park model as their primary residence and as a permanent residence. And I've been inside them. So if our city was going to be held liable for it, like, why wouldn't we already be held liable for it?
I think the question, Mayor and Council, I think the question was if we change our code to now allow additional ones that previously aren't allowed. So we're opening a door to additional ones as opposed to the pre-existing ones.
But I mean, I guess the question is, do we allow it already by code? We do, I'm assuming?
Yeah,
Or is it just not that it's
and I guess
specifically
your
a
point
code?
is we haven't been sued on the ones that currently exist and basically have either been grandfathered in or are permitted under our existing code. And the
Park
answer to
models
that
are
is
399 square feet or smaller. So like that's what I was told was kind of the thing that made it the biggest difference between a manufactured home is the size, more than these standards. So again, there's a lot of confusion on this, so.
There are some slight exceptions where they will allow them to exceed the 400 square feet, but that's generally the standard.
So Mayor and Council, I I think the original question was is sort of opening the door, does that create liability? I think we'd have very strong legal defense, and I think we should prevail on that. I think Councilmember Spilsbury's point is we have these existing and we haven't had any claims or lawsuits, and I think that's a very good point also. Whether it's either through grandfathering or as a permitted right. And so I think that's a good point also. And so I think the liability is not a concern for me.
So hearing what I've heard so far, I think we should just not necessarily table it, but let's extend discussion on this for the future. That's our direction now. I think hearing from council, we want some more information on that so we can make a more informed decision. So I don't think we have any rush on this. Correct, Mary?
Mayor, that's correct. I think what I would ask is for clarification from the council on the additional work and research that you're looking for, because I think based on what we had heard from the committee, it was really they wanted to understand what the safety and design differences were between the park models, the manufactured home and conventional build, and what were the different safety aspects of those different types of construction. So I think if we could get additional clarity on what additional information the council is looking for, we'd be able to do that.
Yeah,
for sure.
we have two council members not here, so I think it's important that they're here to hear the rest of the conversation. Ms. Spilsbury.
I just thought of something that we just passed on June 2nd, is it called an ordinance? I don't know. The code change to allow conventional build. Did we allow those on manufactured homes and park models?
So Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, what the ordinance was that just passed was that in subdivisions, RV subdivisions and manufactured home subdivisions, again, people who own their land, that they can build conventional build on the piece of land that they own. They're not allowed in the parks, but they are allowed in the subdivision.
But sometimes they build them around their manufactured home that's already existing there, kind of.
So we have had instances, and if you wanted details, John could probably get into it more.
I know the whole chassis issue and stuff.
We had issues where, whether it was a park model or a manufactured home, that they tore the structure down to the chassis and built a conventional build around it, which is one of the reasons why we wanted to do and brought that subdivision amendment to council. What I would say is that with the subdivision regulations for both the RV and the manufactured home, we don't get into the term of tenancy. We don't get into, is it a seasonal subdivision? So it really is about the land use, not how those units are used once they're put into that subdivision or that park.
Yeah.
So that is one of the things within those subdivision regulations. It doesn't talk about you can only live in a park model or an RV for 6 months of the year in an RV park. None of that is in there.
Like in that change, we didn't clarify that they had to do it without a chassis or around a chassis or not around a chassis, right?
So, Councilmember Spilsbury, what we did was we actually defined what conventional build was, so that we actually defined what park models and manufactured homes were, and then the conventional build is based on what the building code, and John's going to speak to this because this is his ball.
Am I making sense what I'm saying?
Mayor, Councilmember Spilsbury, yes. When we say conventional construction, it's effectively the same as saying per the residential code that all the other houses are built to. And that's effectively what we've allowed in the subdivisions.
Meaning that they would remove anything that's there and start fresh and build? Because again, I know they've been doing it around what they have. So are we saying we don't allow that anymore?
What is allowed is exactly what you described. You would clear the lot and start fresh with a conventional built house. A addition is allowed in some cases, but to effectively use the chassis and build a house on top of it is not permitted.
Like they wouldn't need to do that anymore to get around something because we just passed this.
Correct.
I'm trying to make a differentiation between whether they're doing that with a park model or a manufactured home, or because they're living there full time or whatever. So, okay. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna look more into it, more still.
Okay, so there's no reason to hurry through. So your direction is probably some of the same information that we've had, and then we can tailor some based on council members' discussion with you during the interim of time. And how long, Ms. Spilsbury, would you like why don't we do this after the break, okay? And give time to work that out?
Yeah, Mayor, yeah.
Or is that?
Yeah, Mayor, I would suggest that as well.
Okay.
But as you just said, in addition to the comments that from Council Members Spilsbury and Adams this morning, we can be sure to talk to the council members who weren't in attendance today, see if they have additional comments, and that way folks can hopefully have the information by the time we come back, and we'll find a date for the full council to hopefully be here, that we can answer any questions that may be on.
I mean, 5 months ago, I knew nothing about this, and I've talked to a lot of people in the industry, like this is what they do every day, all day long, and they make these, they sell them, they, live in them, and I'm hearing different things, is what my point is, so.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all.
See you again next time.
Item 2D is take action on appointments of various boards and committees. Is there a motion to that effect? Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Reddy. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Item 3 is acknowledge receipt of board minutes. Could I have a motion for that? Mr. Adams, thank you, Vice Mayor. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Next is current events and conferences attended. Council members, do you have anything you wish to share? Ms. Spilsbury, do you want to start out?
One thing really quick, Councilmember Adams and I had a really cool opportunity to go to the over to the public safety facility, and we have our newest class of recruits. They'll graduate in 4 weeks, and they do a really cool event called Share Your Roots, and they bring in community members. They had us incognito so that people didn't know they were speaking to council members. I don't know if it worked or not, but so we just got to sit and talk to the recruits, and they could hear what our lives were like, and we could hear what their lives were like, and just make those community connections, and really the emphasis on how important community is as in a role as a police officer. And it was a really cool event. I really enjoyed it, and I'm grateful that they're putting emphasis on that kind of stuff in our police department.
Vice Mayor.
I want to bounce off of Simon's military metaphor of the submarine and mention that today is Women Veterans Day, which is observed annually on June 12th to recognize and honor the service and sacrifice of women who have served in United States Armed Services. I want to recognize my wife, who served as a drill sergeant in the Air Force. Her bio is also included in the rolls of the Military Women's Memorial in Arlington. Wow. So thank you to all the women who served.
Mr. Adams.
Had the opportunity yesterday to attend a fundraiser for Apache Junction officer Fazio, who was killed in the line of duty, and my council district coordinator and I went there, and it was around noontime, and I was very impressed that I would say there were at least 2,000 people there, various law enforcement agencies, and a great number of members of the public. So it was wonderful to see that kind of community support for our neighboring community and the Apache Junction Police Department.
Thank you for sharing. And the memorial service will be at Central Christian this Monday, I believe at 10 a.m. Great. Anyone else?
Yeah, just highlight one of our neighbor cities opened up new extension to the light rail, the South Central extension. And so just years in the making, adding more opportunities to travel around the region to different parts of our neighboring cities. So just the connecting points that Val Metro and the rail are adding to, the future of this region. So,
Thank you. I was able to attend a American Public Power Association conference in New Orleans this past weekend and learn about electricity and economic development and how that's going to affect all of us in America. And then Scott Boucher and Kyle, what's his last name? Nicholson, yes, they were there as well from the city. Appreciate them. Lots of great information there. Attended a charrette with City Manager Butler yesterday with downtown. Maybe you want to share a little bit about that? You kind of alluded to it earlier.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. No, we were able to have a great discussion with public and private sector interests that are looking to better downtown Mesa, both through their capital investments, but programming and other activities that they're looking to do downtown. So I'm very bullish on the future of downtown.
Thank you. Well, while you're at it, can you share future meetings?
And I promise the goal as city manager is not to have long council meetings, even though I've had a bad track record so far. So the good news is there's no study session next Thursday. Please keep that in mind. But prepare for another probably lengthy study session on the 26th as we try to get several items wrapped up before we go into the council break. But the next meeting will be on Monday at study session at 5:15 p.m., followed by a regular council meeting after that.
Great, thank you. Next item, we'll convene an executive session for the reappointment of Judge Novell. Is there a motion to convene a session? Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Reddy. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, motion passes unanimously. We'll meet behind us and then we'll reconvene. We're now reconvening our study session. Our next item is to provide direction on the position of the city magistrate. Is there a motion to place Judge Novell's name on the June 16th agenda for reappointment?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Ms. Spilsbury. Thank you, Mr. Idia. All in favor say aye. 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 Motion passes unanimously. Is there a motion to adjourn our meeting? Thank you, Mr. Adams. Thank you, Vice Mayor. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Motion adjourned. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.